City Service Authority Board of Directors, regular meeting to order. Good afternoon, Mr. Powell. How are you?
Good afternoon.
If you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Eisenhower? Here. Mr. Hipple?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Ms. Sadler?
We don't bring her in yet.
Oh,
Here.
okay. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Ms. Larson?
Here. I'd like to see if I could get a motion to allow Ms. Sadler to participate remotely due to medical condition that keeps her from participating with us here.
Motion?
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hipple?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye. Ms. Sadler?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. We have no presentations this evening?
No, ma'am.
Okay. We do have one public comment this evening, so we will call Jay Everson to the podium. If you could please state your address and name, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Jay Everson, 6923 Chancery Lane, and out there in Whitefoot at Colonial Heritage. The reason I came was, I've talked about this before. I know that you'll be considering water rates shortly, and it's always disturbed me that for a county that we're concerned about the amount of growth, that we subsidize community wells that are in A1 land, because they cost more over the long run, even with the money that they put up front. It's just a question of time until that money runs out, and people within the PSA are subsidizing those who live in rural lands. And I know there's been a lot of angst about, growth, and I just would think that we should have their water rates reflect the actual cost, the operational and depreciated cost of those community wells, which is a little higher than it would be for the rest of us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That brings us to the consent calendar. We have on our consent calendar this evening one item, minutes adoption. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion for approval?
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Are there any public hearings this evening?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. We have one item for a board consideration, a budget amendment and final contract award, Kingswood Water Main Replacement, $4,880,893. Mr. Powell, do you have information?
I do. In May of 2021, the board approved a design-build contract or award for the Kingswood Water Main Replacement Project to the team of Tuano Contractors and Rummel, Klepper, and Call. The award was for $280,555 for design, and it allowed the general manager to execute a final total project contract up to $4,675,000. Project design is now 70% complete, and the updated total project estimated amount is now $4,880,883 due to material cost increases and some additional construction items, including paving and valves. Since the current estimate exceeds the amount authorized by the board in May, board action is required now to approve the final contract. Resolution authorizes the general manager to execute the final contract in the amount of $4,880,883 and appropriate an additional $425,000 from unrestricted net position to the project to bring the project budget to $5.1 million to accommodate the project cost and a contingency allowance. Staff recommends approval of the resolution. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
The only question I had was, if we approve this, when will actual construction start, and how long do you think it's supposed to take?
It's a multi-year.
Multi-year?
It's a multi-year project, yes, sir. Probably 2 to 3 years.
3 years, okay.
All right. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Mr. Powell, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hipple?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye. Are there any board requests and directives? Thank you. Seeing none, general manager's update. Mr. Powell?
I don't have any additional items for tonight.
I just have one question on the dashboard that you sent us. And it showed the water revenues and the sewer revenues, and it looked like for the fiscal year, which we're just about halfway through, we were about where we should be on water, but on sewer, we were considerably lower. Is there a particular reason why that? It looked like the sewer revenues, instead of being 50% of the year, were probably somewhere around 30 or 35% of the total budget. Are we just behind or what?
I actually will have to look at that a little bit further, Mr. Eisenhower.
Okay.
They should be about the same. So
Okay.
I'll look into that further.
It struck me when I looked at it, and
Right.
I just thought maybe I'd ask the question. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, with that, if there's a motion to adjourn until 5 PM on February 8th, 2022 for our regular for our regular meeting, excuse me.
Motion?
Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you.
I lost you for a minute, Mr. Powell.
That's all right, thank you.
All right, thank you. We're adjourned.
I'll call this meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors to order. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Sir, Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower represents the Jamestown District. Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Mr. Hippel represents the Powhatan District. Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Larson represents the Berkeley District. Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon represents the Roberts District and is chair of the board. Sitting to my left is Adam Kinsman, County Attorney, and I'm Scott Stevens, County Administrator, and it's my pleasure to be clerk to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. We now need a motion to allow Ms. Sadler to participate electronically. I would note that Ms. Sadler is unable to be with us this evening due to a medical condition.
So moved.
Have a motion on behalf of Ms. Sadler. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Welcome, Ms. Sadler. And let me mention for the
Thank you, sir.
for the audience that Ms. Sadler is going to be on a bit of a delay, and so we'll try to remember to make sure that we have an opportunity to wait for her comments or participation. Does the board wish to amend the agenda for this meeting in order to consider item number 3 under board considerations after the second public hearing, so that after the treasurer's item on an ordinance, so we can reconsider the issue brought to us earlier on by the Commissioner of Revenue? And in addition to that, do we wish to amend the closed session to include the Thomas Nelson Community College Board appointment for that closed session? If so, can I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Let me just mention to the audience, for those who may be here to make comment about the public hearing on the Ford's Village project, that the applicant has requested that that item be delayed until March 8th, that there will not be a presentation this evening by the applicant or staff. The public hearing will be open because it was advertised, but it will remain open until the March 8th meeting. If you wish, you may make public comment tonight when that public hearing comes along, but in case you would prefer to see the revisions that the applicant may be planning to make in that proposal, you can come back on March 8th to make public comment at that time. Of course, the board's always available to receive written communications and individual contact from members of the public, but in terms of the public hearing this evening, if you speak at the public hearing this evening, which you may do, you would not be able to speak at the public hearing on March 8th. So the public hearing will remain open, but you may speak at only one time, either tonight or on March 8th. So I just wanted to make that clear before we move on. Okay. Now we'll move on to a moment of silence for the opening of our meeting, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And let me just mention that this evening, the pledge is going to be led by Liam Green. Liam is a third grade student at Norwich Elementary School. He's a middle child of Noah and Ling Green, and his sister Kayla is a sixth grader, and he has a 2-year-old sister as well. He's sandwiched right in between them, and he's a young man who enjoys history and reading, and he has also recently been elected as the class rep from his class at Norwich Elementary School. And I should also mention that perhaps be important to know that his father is the vice principal at Lafayette High School currently, and his uncle is our Commonwealth's attorney, Nate Green. So Liam, if you would come up to the podium and after a moment of silence, if you would lead us in the pledge, that would be great.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with invisible liberty and justice for all.
And if you'd come up, I've got a certificate and a pin to thank you for coming out tonight. Great job. Okay.
I did not recognize his father behind the mask. His dad was a very good middle school teacher as well before he went to the high school arena. So, thank you.
We do not have any public comment cards for this evening, and there is no consent calendar to be considered for this evening, so we'll move right to public hearings. And our first public hearing is the pre-budget public hearing, and so I'll introduce Sharon Day to bring up that topic.
Good evening. Tonight provides an opportunity for the public to comment on the upcoming budgets for the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2023 and June 30th, 2024. Thank you.
And the purpose of the public hearing this evening is to take input from citizens on the priorities for the budget for the coming year. There is no formal presentation at this point. There will be a lot of discussion of the budget, of course, throughout the winter and spring. I have two speaker cards, and the first is Denise Kellogg.
Hello, I'm Denise Kellogg. I am a 25-year resident of James City County.
And if you'd mention your address, Ms. Kellogg.
My home address is 204 South Point Drive. My work address is at Jamestown. I work at Jamestown, our nation's birthplace, and it's a privilege to be there. It's an incredible place. It's one of the most important historic sites in our nation. Pre-COVID, we greeted more than 200,000 guests, most of whom were from elsewhere outside of Virginia to Jamestown. I'm here to just let you know that we are struggling. Financially, we need to bring our guests back, and it's been a very difficult time during COVID for all of us. Any additional tourism funding that comes to the James City County, it should be considered that other organizations outside of Tourism Council be considered to receive independent tourism funding outside of just the joint activities. We participate in Tourism Council. Ruth will tell you I've never missed a meeting. I'm there every time. But we also have to do our own work with our own constituents to bring people back. What we do is we provide educational programs and tours, and obviously our archaeology is world-renowned. We've been doing this for a long time, and we could really use your support financially now more than ever. We do not receive any additional regular state funding as other organizations in the county do. So we are heavily dependent on the money that we receive through the tourism funding that you provide. So I'm just here to say, please help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kellogg.
To be clear, Ms. Kellogg is for historic Jamestown, the island, Jamestown Island.
It's, Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation
Yes.
operates our part of historic Jamestown.
Thank you.
And Jay Everson.
Thank you, Denise.
Jefferson, 6923 Chancery Lane in Colonial Heritage. And congratulations, Mr. McLennan, on your chairmanship, and to Ms. Sauer for her vice chairmanship. And I will say that the Jamestown archaeological dig, when my mother was still alive, that was when she would always come down here and was always very excited about this, because she said all those kids, they're so enthusiastic, and it's so refreshing. The reason I came tonight, though, on the pre-budget was in reference to the CIP for the schools. In there, there's two items. One is, of course, the Lafayette, I guess, renovation of Building 900. And that school is, what, 50 years old or just about? And so I can understand why it would be time to put some money into it. But that project will increase their the capacity of the school by 200 kids. And since we know it's already, quote, under-enrolled in terms of the other two schools because it was moved down in sports in different league. I don't know the classes, how that works, but it's been downgraded because of lack of enrollment. Consequently, with the increase of 200 students, it seems to me that spending any money at all to expand the cafeteria at Jamestown, I find to be wasteful. Because, as Mr. Eisenhower pointed out at your joint meeting with the city council and the school board, we can redistrict. That doesn't cost us any money, a lot of heartache, but no money. And I would encourage you to remove that from the CIP, like you did with the elementary school last year, not to be considered by the planning commission, et cetera. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Everson. With that, we'll move on to our next public hearing. I'm sorry, I have to open we've done that. Close the public hearing. Now we move on to the second public hearing item, which is an ordinance to amend County Code Section 20-86, cigarette tax penalties. I should mention that our county treasurer, Jenny Tomes, is with us electronically, and should also mention that there will be some participation this evening on some of our cases electronically, just so that the public at home and those here in the audience will know that. It's a good time to just remember that we are in the midst of a very significant increase in the spread of COVID-19, and good time for us to redouble efforts to encourage vaccinations, masking, social distancing, and staying safe in this environment. Okay, so let's move on then with item number 2.
Good afternoon, Chairman McGlinnan and members of the board. This is Jenny Toms, the treasurer. I apologize for my voice. I am fighting an illness. Before you is a minor change to the ordinance for the recently implemented cigarette tax. In reviewing the ordinance as written, I realized a different penalty rate from all other tax collected by the county that was established for this tax by assessing penalty monthly. Additionally, our software does not currently have the mechanisms in place to charge a monthly penalty. I'm asking this board to consider changing the penalty for non-payment of cigarette tax to be a one-time 10%. Interest will continue to be assessed each month per the ordinance.
Any questions from members of the board? Ms. Tomes, thank you for responding to a question that I had about that, and I just wondered if you could respond to the follow-up question that I posed, simply the one of whether any mention of the calculation of the actual amount of interest on the penalty might be more appropriate in Section 3 of that part of the code versus number 1.
Yes, I can work with Adam to make sure that change is made.
Okay, so then if I would understand it, then when we consider a resolution, the amended resolution would move the discussion of the calculation of the penalty from Section A1 to Section A3 of the ordinance. Would that be right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me go ahead and open the public hearing. You have any cards? All right. I will then close the public hearing and ask if there is a
Motion?
motion from the board. Motion to approve the resolution. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. That will bring us then to item number 3 from the board considerations. This would not be subject to a public hearing. This is a consideration of an item that we discussed earlier during the end of 2021, relating to a request from the Commissioner of Revenue to allow the assessment of a penalty for the failure to file reports of taxes collected under the meals tax provisions. Bradshaw.
Good evening, and I really do appreciate you moving me up a little bit. It does make it a little bit easier after having been here since 7:30 this morning. Ms.
Bradshaw,
Larson,
if you wouldn't mind just kind of refreshing everybody's memory about the issue.
currently, our code does not have a filing penalty for excise taxes. This creates, believe it or not, an unfair playing field between people who do file on time and people who do not. Those who do not file on time, in effect, do not pay a penalty for not filing. They don't get penalized until an assessment is made and billed, which is generally going to be 30 days later. So in effect, someone who does not file has a 30-day free loan of county money. We've researched, and before putting it in the request for the 10% penalty, we did research. All the other jurisdictions in the area do have filing penalties. And again, and they are assessed by the commissioner where the returns are filed.
So, Mr. Bradshaw, if I can understand the process here, is it the case that a report has to be filed before the tax is assessed?
Yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, you do not know
Right.
what the proper assessment will be.
I think it's important
And then, again, you can't do an administrative assessment before the due date. And with the way the post office works, a return is due on the 20th of the month. It needs to be postmarked by the 20th of the month. It sometimes doesn't get to my office until the 30th, but it's still a timely filed return.
And so then, based on that return, you provide information to the treasurer's office that allows them to bill.
Normally payment comes with the return. But if such a circumstance came up that the return came in 10 days late, postmarked the 20th without a payment, the treasurer would then send a statement. They basically have 10 days to make their payment if they have not done so. In the case of an administrative assessment, those are generally not done until the 15th, maybe even the 20th of the next month. Already 30 days past the due date. You then have to send certified mail advising the taxpayer of their liability, and they then have 10 days from the postmark on the certified mail to make payment without incurring any additional penalty or interest.
And just to be clear about what funds are involved here, we're talking about the tax that the customer has paid to the restaurant.
That is correct.
For their share of the bill, which is
These
the tax.
excise taxes are what are known as trust taxes.
So it's not a tax on the restaurant itself; it's a tax that has been paid already by the customer, and
That
now
is correct. It is not considered any part of the restaurant's gross receipts.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'll make the motion.
The motion to approve the resolution has been made by Ms. Larson. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Sir, Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
No, I didn't get a chance to jump in, but I did have some comments, but I will be voting no, because I do feel like this is a double penalty on a small amount of habitual offenders. But thank you.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll try to make sure that, that we give you an opportunity to interject your opinion, Ms. Sadler, as we move along here. Okay, so we'll move back to the
Thank you,
public
I
hearings.
appreciate it.
Move back to public hearings, and we're back down to public hearing number 3, which is, I can just see here, the cell tower lease amendment, 5301 Longhill Road. Mr. Carnifax.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We had a request from us to expand the base of the cell tower by approximately 150 square feet to put some more instruments down there. Currently, it's being used as a cell tower. This request will not negatively impact the users of the park or the facility. So I'm recommending approval of the attached resolution. This will increase our monthly lease by $433.50. I'll be glad to answer any questions if the board members have any.
Any questions for Mr. Carnifax? Ms. Sadler?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. All right, no questions. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. No cards, no speakers on this particular matter. I'll close the public hearing and ask the board to
Make the motion.
motion to approve the lease. Mr. Stevens, please call the roll.
Mr. Hippel. Aye. Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower. Aye. Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, we have case now Z200002, 2280 Lake Powell Road rezoning. Mr. Holt.
Thank you very much. I'm standing in tonight for Ms. Haynes, who couldn't be with us this evening. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Benny Zhang of Kaufman and Knowles has applied on behalf of the Smith family to rezone approximately 1.9 acres located at 2280 Lake Powell Road from R8 Rural Residential to R2 General Residential for the purpose of creating one additional single-family lot. Property is designated low-density residential on the 2045 Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map, and it's located inside the PSA. However, the James City Service Authority has let us know that public water and sewer are not available to this property, and that a private well and septic system will need to be used for the additional dwelling unit. Advance me one slide. I can't get the, is there a second exhibit for this one? So under the current R8 zoning, the minimum lot size is 3 acres, even for a family subdivision. So a further subdivision of this parcel would not be possible under the R8 zoning. Should it be rezoned to R2, the minimum lot size is 30,000 square feet for lots served by well and septic. Staff has reviewed this preliminary plat and found that the proposal can meet the R2 district ordinance requirements. Staff finds the proposed rezoning consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff further finds that the impact of one single-family dwelling would not adversely impact surrounding development and would be consistent with by right minor subdivisions that are currently permitted in the R2 district. Staff recommends the board approve this application. On October 6th, the Planning Commission recommended approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Is the applicant, they're aware about the sewage and well, and they're favorable to that?
Yes, that's really their only option.
Okay, thank you.
And any
Mr.
other
Holt,
questions?
you did say that this was consistent with the comprehensive plan, correct?
Correct. Property is designated low-density residential on the comprehensive plan land use map.
All right, and I'm reading here the Planning Commission. I was having a hard time hearing with the delay. I apologize. So I'm reading here that the Planning Commission did vote to approve, correct?
Mr. Kropp will be coming to the stand in just a moment. Richard Kropp from the Planning Commission is with us this evening.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Holt?
On this time.
Okay. Mr. Kropp, would you mind telling us about the Planning Commission's action on this? Welcome. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. At our October 6th meeting, as Mr. Holt said, we did vote to recommend approval, 6-0. We felt that the down zoning, in a sense, from R8 to R2 and the smaller land sizes associated with those lots allowed a family to put a family subdivision in there, and the property couldn't be divided any further or rezoned any further. So we felt that was consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Any questions for Mr. Kraft? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let me go ahead and open the public hearing, and I have one speaker card, and that's Mr. Benny Zhang. Mr. Zhang, former councilman from the city of Williamsburg, welcome. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. It's great to be with y'all tonight, and Happy New Year's. I'm here with Kaufman Knowles. We're at 4801 Courthouse Street, Suite 300 of James City County, and it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of the applicant. Just to give a little bit of background, Paul Smith was the original applicant on it. He unfortunately had passed away unexpectedly about 2 years ago, and the other owner to the title of the property is Ms. Iris Smith. And I just wanted to introduce the family tonight. You see the conceptual maps, you see the papers, and thought it'd be nice to put the face to the applicant. So we have the entire family here. Mr. Dominique and I have worked throughout this application process. He and his wife, Ms. Vanessa, will be the intended residents of the next door neighbor, so to say, to take care of their mother, who may be elderly, but she is very vivacious and very energetic. So don't let that fool you. We agree with staff's recommendation. We agree with Planning Commission's recommendation for approval, and we ask for your support. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. Anybody have a question for the applicant? No? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, we have no other speaker cards. Let me close the public hearing and ask the board's
I'll move the motion.
motion to approve the.
Motion to approve.
Okay. All right,
Motion to approve.
thank you, thank you. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Larson,
Aye.
Ms. Sadler,
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower,
Aye.
Mr. Hippel,
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item, which is the AFD 21-0002, 9958 Mill Pond Run, Barnes Swamp AFD edition. Mr. Holt.
Thank you again very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mr. David Hogue has applied to enroll approximately 60 acres located at 9958 Mill Pond Run into the Barnes Swamp Agricultural and Forestal District, otherwise known as an AFD. This parcel is currently undeveloped and is located more than 1 mile away from the core of the AFD district. Per state code, when a parcel is located more than a mile away from the core, state code allows it to be added to the AFD if the governing body finds that the property contains agriculturally and forestally significant land. The applicant has been working with the Virginia Department of Forestry and the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District to develop harvesting and resource management plans. Approximately 5 acres of harvested land will be reforested, and the remaining harvested acreage will be converted into pasture. At its October 21st meeting, the AFD Advisory Committee found that indeed the property is agriculturally and forestally significant and recommended approval of this application by a vote of 8-0. At its December 1st meeting, the Planning Commission concurred as well and recommended approval. With these findings and recommendations, staff also recommends the board approve this application subject to the proposed conditions, which are consistent with the other properties in the AFD district. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Holt about the AFD edition? Ms. Sadler?
No, thank you. I'm good.
Great, okay. Thank you very much. Then I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Mr. Crop.
Evening once again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Vote to approve this particular case, and three of the items that really stood out was the equine restocking option, and the commission commented that they hope the applicant goes ahead with that. The Soil and Water Conservation District recommendations were also talked about very favorably, and then finally the reforesting of the 5 acres and then converting to pasture of the remainder of the property was viewed as all three of these items very, very key components of that application.
Any questions for Mr. Croft?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Now we'll open the public hearing. And we have no speaker cards, so I will close the public hearing and ask the board for direction.
Motion for approval?
Motion to approve this AFD addition. Mr. Stevens, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, that brings us down to the next item, which is the Z210012 and Master Plan MP 210003 proffer and Master Plan amendments for the continuing care retirement facility at Ford's Colony, known as Ford's Village. And as I noted earlier, we will not have a presentation this evening. The applicant has requested a deferral to March 8th in order to consider concerns that have been raised about the proposal and to potentially make some revisions. The fact that the case will not be heard tonight does not mean that we won't take public comment. We will open the public hearing, and if anybody wishes to speak, they may do so. The hearing will be continued to March 8th, at which time those who haven't spoken yet will have an opportunity to speak. So with that, I will go ahead and open the public hearing. I think we'll get a report from the Planning Commission when they are with us for March 8th. Anybody wish to speak on this item this evening? No public comments, so close the public hearing.
We'll keep the public open.
Keep the public hearing open until March 8th for that meeting.
Do you need a motion for postponement?
Sure, yes.
Motion to postpone to the March 8th date?
Okay, we have a motion to approve the request of the applicant to defer this item until March 8th. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Moves us to our next public hearing, which is SUP 210018, 1403 Jamestown Road, rental of rooms. Ms. Costello, I think, is joining us electronically.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Mr. Frank Berggren has applied for a special use permit to allow the short-term rental of 2 bedrooms within a caretaker-occupied single-family home at 1403 Jamestown Road. The property is zoned R1, limited residential, designated low-density residential on the comprehensive plan land use map, and is located inside the primary service area. This SUP, if granted, would allow for short-term rentals throughout the year. No changes to the footprint of the home are proposed. Staff finds some favorable factors for this application, such as the presence of adequate off-street parking and that a caretaker will live on site. The applicant will obtain the proper licensing and inspections. However, the proposal does not meet the recommendations regarding locations for short-term rentals in the 2045 comprehensive plan. Staff finds the proposal incompatible with surrounding zoning and development and not consistent with the recommendations of the adopted 2045 comprehensive plan. Therefore, staff is unable to recommend approval of this application. At its December 1st meeting, the Planning Commission recommended denial of this application by a vote of 6-0. Should the Board of Supervisors approve this application, staff has included proposed conditions for consideration. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for staff or the applicant? Nope. Ms. Sadler, anything?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Kraft, would you talk about the Planning Commission's consideration of this item?
Sir, members of the board. Yes, the commission did vote 6-0 to not recommend approval of this application, and even though the applicant said there would be a caretaker residing on site, the main reason is that this is the first short-term rental application to come forward under the new 2045 comprehensive plan, and that plan does impose some stricter recommendations on short-term rentals, including emphasizing that one of the performance factors should be that the owner resides on the property. And so based on that, the commission felt that as the first application under the new comprehensive plan, that we should support that. And that was the reason for the vote.
Any questions for Planning Commission representative? No? Thank you very much. Mr. Kraft. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Let me recognize Scott Bergsgrove.
Hi, good evening. I'm the applicant. My name is Franklin Scott Bergren. The house on Jamestown Road sits on approximately
Mr. Bergman, would you mind providing your address as well for the record?
My current address is 5821 Painted Leaf Lane, Naples, Florida.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. The property at 1403 Jamestown Road lies on approximately 1 acre. My closest residents are through significantly wooded areas and across the main thoroughfare, our main roadway on the front. When I was reviewing the comprehensive plan, as I looked through, after I purchased the home and I looked through things on the comprehensive plan, I determined that during the comprehensive plan and while they were going through the process, the recommendation that they were supposed to look at with the comprehensive plan was that a caretaker be on site. At some point throughout the process, obviously it's been changed to the owner of the property be on site. By allowing a caretaker to be on site, it would help fulfill some of the comprehensive plan requirements, such as affordable housing. That caretaker would receive a discount on their housing as part of living there. They would take care of the property, they would maintain it, they would perform the cleanings for the occupants in the house. Further on down the road, this is going to be the house I retire in, but in the meantime, to help care for the property, this is what I was looking at doing. If this doesn't meet your requirements, I ask that you would consider approving it based on the fact I would only rent it out when I'm on the property and living there. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant?
I do have one question. Is there a caretaker there currently, or you would hire the caretaker after if it were to be approved?
I would hire the caretaker if it were to be approved.
Okay.
Currently, it's under renovation.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Martha Caruso?
Good evening. I'm Martha Caruso. I live at 110 Dover Road, which is just about behind the applicant's proposal here. I was at the previous meeting of the Planning Commission where this application was denied. Basically, I'm here to represent our neighborhood and the integrity of it. I bought my home over 20 years ago. It's a median income area, which I think is an area a monetary area that appeals to many people in the Williamsburg working community. Giving this home over to an out-of-state owner who basically will use it to rent out really doesn't answer that kind of a community question for us. We are a family neighborhood, and we all work to preserve that. Excuse me here. Pretty much what I want to say here. We don't have an HOA to protect us. or to make rules for us, we have the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. And I just hope that you will go with the Planning Commission's recommendation to preserve our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caruso. Frank Caruso? Okay, this will be your one opportunity to speak, Mr. Caruso, if you'd like. Thank you. Anne Baran?
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Ann Buren. I live at 108 Dover. My home is directly behind this property. We share a property line, and the back of my house is the living area of my home. I see everything that goes on in on my neighbor's property, and I'm certain that they can see everything that goes on my property, especially in the part of my home where I live. We too bought our home in the 90s because of the neighborhood. We raised 3 kids there in 3 different schools, and we never intended to live behind a business. There's plenty of opportunity in Williamsburg for that to be the case. If you're looking for that, that was not something we were looking for. The quality of our neighborhood is that it is old, small, the neighbors know one another, and I just disagree with changing the plan. And in fact, I don't know if this is the correct time, but on my door this morning was a letter in opposition to this from another neighbor who was uncertain of the process. I haven't opened it, and I don't know if it even matters to you all now or if you have access to the letters that we've written previously. But I just would hope that the plan was designed and given a great deal of thought initially, and that we would stick to the plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Buren. Sharon Dennis?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Dennis. Again, my address is 100 St. George's Boulevard. And so we already know that I've been operating a short-term rental, so I got familiar with it. And I'd like to at least give what I already know to be true of a short-term rental. And I know that you're really struggling, everyone is, with the unknown, the fear factors. What could possibly happen? Could this be like Virginia Beach? Can this be like some of these tourist communities that are high density and quite different than what we have here, which is Williamsburg being a tourist community? I think one of the initial persons that came to speak mentioned to you how they're struggling because tourism has gone down. And I believe tourism here in Williamsburg will continue to go down for many reasons, which I will get into later. But in talking in regards to this particular SUP, I took it upon myself to visit the area that they are requesting to do an SUP in. And it's on the general road of Jamestown Road. No one's walking along that road. It's pretty private. So I guess what I'm going to see if I can say here, people that are concerned about what kind of impact it would have on them privately, currently you have by right family daycare. I grew up with a lot of children, and it was a lot of loud children. So by right, anyone in any of these neighborhoods can open up at least for 5 children. That's pretty loud, a lot louder than you are going to get with this short-term rental or tourist home, however you'd like to say it. We'll get into later when I speak about the comprehensive plan. I would say I was a little disappointed, to say the least, that as much as they said they try to reach out, that they didn't reach out to those few of us that already have a special use permit, that are already doing this, or to the neighbors that are actually, that could speak to the reality of these concerns. I think it's bonus, a benefit to our community. And again, I'll get into that later. But in regards to this SUP, I'm seeing for myself personally no complaints, very quiet, very appreciative guests that allow for our community to continue to benefit tax-wise and et cetera, et cetera. In this regard, for this one, I've seen and heard the neighbors very concerned. They're afraid. Well, I actually listened to what they were saying, and a lot of their, I should say, some of the statements that I heard them make, they were making about what they've already dealt with long-term owners. And so the irony is, this is what they're afraid of, that they would be impacted on. But the short-term renter that comes here will do the opposite. They will do the opposite. And I don't think we've studied this enough, and I don't think the comprehensive plan studied it properly. I know they said they worked hard, but I think the way they approached getting their information has a lot to be desired. So I knew this morning when I was trying to think of what I was going to say to you in regards to all of this, this would take longer than 5 minutes or 15 minutes for me. And I really wish I could have been more involved in the comprehensive plan, which happened during COVID, and it wasn't very easy to even know how to participate in it. I'm going to leave with this. I think, having seen their property, I don't know if you've all witnessed it, but it's a pretty isolated property. And I think that them getting the opportunity to be able to finance it so they can retire to it makes great sense in improving our community and improving the properties that are around it. I don't think it's going to have the negative impact that many of the neighbors are worried about. I see them actually making it improved. So I'm sure there's more that I can say. I would ask this question. I would ask, has anyone here heard of any complaints for those that are currently active and SUP'd for doing a tourist rental, short-term rental? Do I get to ask?
No, you don't.
Okay, I didn't know. I don't know the rules. I'm going to learn. I am going to learn. I do want to say I plan on getting very involved now that I'm of age, because it does seem to me you have to have a lot of free time to do all the work that you guys, do work hard doing. So I thank you.
Thank you. Emily Huffman.
Good evening. I'm Emily Huffman. I live at 2032 Back River Lane. I was not able to be physically present for the planning committee meeting, but my husband was here, and I know we're both becoming very familiar faces and voices when it comes to short-term rentals. But I did watch the replay on YouTube, and I was quite dismayed to hear some of the concerns addressed by the neighbors. And I'm going to reiterate a little bit of what Sharon already mentioned, because they were my concerns as well. I am hearing a lot of fear from these neighbors, and I'm wondering, some of them have said they have traveled Airbnb themselves, and I would wonder how many of them, when their families travel and stay in an Airbnb, how many neighbors they have scared away, how many neighborhoods they have disrupted, how many loud parties they have held. And my guess would be the answer is none, because people are not coming to stay in a home to throw a party. They're definitely not coming to Williamsburg to go on a bender. People are coming to Williamsburg to spend their days at CW, at Jamestown, at Yorktown. They're coming to spend their money at Busch Gardens and at Water Country. They're coming to cook meals with their families when they've been apart for 2 years because of COVID. So I don't think people are coming here to disrupt your neighborhood or your lives. I don't think they're coming here to peer out their windows and into your living spaces to see what you're doing. I think they're coming here to enjoy time with their family, because we've all missed that the past few years. I've also driven by this gentleman's property. I drive by it almost every day, and it is primarily surrounded by trees. So I don't think you're not staring into someone else's house. You're not looking into your neighbor's home. And I don't think any short-term guests would be either. My personal experience as a host of a short-term rental is most people aren't at the homes during the day because they are out. They are out doing the touristy things that people come to Williamsburg to do. So this fear of any new person walking down your street is an odd one to me because they're not coming to walk down their street. They're coming to walk down Dog Street. They're coming to walk down Busch Gardens. So I feel this gentleman's property is large enough to not interfere with the neighbors in any real way. I also think that the comprehensive plan and the new verbiage is flawed, and I believe the term used by one of the committee members was that they did exhaustive research to involve the community in the new comp plan and the new verbiage, and I find that word is inappropriate because, as Ms. Dennis stated, those of us that hold SUPs and are actually active with short-term rentals were not contacted. And all of our contact information is available on the JCC website. You have names, addresses, phone numbers for every single one of us that hold an SUP. And we were not contacted to get any input on how this actually affects our neighborhoods and how it affects our neighbors. We personally have not had any complaints from our neighbors. We have been able to improve our neighborhood because we have been able to fully paint the exterior of our home. We have been able to put on new gutters, new shutters. We have been able to hire a landscaper. So the thought that you're going to make the neighborhood go downhill, I do not think is what is happening in reality. Because as a host, we want to make our home an attractive place for people to visit. And in order to do that, it has to look nice, and it has to be well maintained, and it has to have the curb appeal that someone would see it on a website and go, oh, that would be a great place to be with my family and enjoy Williamsburg. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, those are all the speaker cards that I have, so I will close the public hearing and ask the board for questions.
Yeah, I have a, being that I have an SUP with the same situation, I know that, we had talked about neighborhoods and neighborhoods awareness, are you in a neighborhood, are you not in a neighborhood? Mine happens to be back in the woods, hidden. But I will tell you that my experience with having an Airbnb has been very beneficial. And I've gotten some really neat people in that have come here, and they're coming here to experience Williamsburg, James City County, York County. They're gone during the day most of the time, as they're just right next to my house through the woods. And so they come and they spend the night and enjoy that, and they go out on the creek and have bonfires and that sort of thing. And we rarely hear them through our little bit of woods in between us. You may hear them laughing or playing horseshoes or that sort of thing, or sitting by the fire. But I know it's a word to some people as far as, is it going to be a wild group that comes in and takes over the place? And I think that's more into the rental part of itself. If it's rented so low and has so many people in there, then you're going to get that. But if the rental costs, like most of them, are a little bit higher, but comparable to our hotels and motels, you're going to get families in there that, spend some time and are able to enjoy the outdoors and enjoy what we offer. I know that, Mr. Croft, can you come up for a minute, if you don't mind me using you for a minute with your expertise? The SUPs, I know that all of us who have done it right, there's some out there that are operating an Airbnb that have not gone through the process. Some of them don't know, some of them may know. I can't comment on that. But the ones who have gone through the SUP process and have said, hey, James City County, I want to be able to do this. I want to do it legally. I want to do it the right way and pay my taxes, and you've got the bed tax and everything else that goes along with it. When y'all were looking into this,
and I've had a couple comments that no one checked with anybody who had an SUP. Were there any that you know of, and you may not know, were there any that you know of we were able to reach with an SUP? I know I didn't get a call, and it sounds like a couple of people here didn't get a call on how are y'all dealing with it? What are y'all seeing? What do you like? What do you dislike? You know, how's it affecting the neighbors? Have you gotten any complaints? Were y'all able to reach into the SUP people?
I don't know if the SUP holders were contacted specifically, Mr. Hippel. I know that, you know, the media, the newspaper advertisements and the efforts to communicate on radio and so on with the public to say, hey, you know, the community participation team or the planning commission working group is looking into this particular topic. We relied on public media more, and perhaps Mr. Holt might have some additional information on individual contacts, but to my knowledge, I don't think the SUP holders were contacted. But if I can, I was going to mention this for the next case, but I think it's a good opportunity. The Planning Commission has been struggling with short-term rentals for quite a while for all the obvious reasons, and you've heard discussions in the past about, boy, it'd be nice if we could have a sunset clause on this particular use. And on the next case, one of the discussion items that came up amongst planning commissioners, and again, realizing it might be more wishful thinking, was to say, if the SUP applied to the applicant rather than conveying in perpetuity with the property, it would probably be a lot easier to assess a case on an individual basis. But the concern is, no matter how well intentioned an applicant or a current owner may be, and how well they manage their property, but because that SUP conveys regardless, you know, of who's owning the property, the concern was the guarantee wasn't there for future Airbnb or bed and breakfast operators, and that has caused quite a bit of discussion amongst planning commissioners. On the one hand, we feel the need to enforce the recommendations in the comp plan, which are a little more stringent than the actual ordinance, but we felt the need to enforce those and go with those performance factors because we've seen so many of those. But as I said, I think the personal preference would be if there was some way to consider any approvals to be applicant-based and not property-based. That would be, I think, a better process. But legally, we may not be able to do that.
And this may be a question for Adam, is would something like this, instead of tying it, it'd be tied to the land, but as long as that owner owned that land, if it was sold or conveyed to someone else, then you would have to reapply for that. I don't know if that's a legal thing. Probably not.
Once you grant the SUP, that runs with the land, not the owner.
Right, but if the land was sold, could that be a break in that SUP that then would have the next owner would have to reapply for the SUP to continue operating where the last owner?
I don't believe the Virginia Code gives you that ability, sir.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're so limited on what we can and can't do with codes, and then it boxes in a corner.
Exactly.
And then we put things in place that, you know, it's tough for a citizen to be able to get through all the, you know, and I know that, you know, we advertise heavily, and I know y'all do, you know, because I see it. But, you know, a lot of times people see something in the paper or online or don't come together, and they just, I don't know what that is, you know, and they don't pay attention to it. But
people are busy, and
they're swamped with everything coming in at them, and Amazon packages being delivered, and they're sending you something, and so there's a lot coming at people all the time. And I know we can't, you know, get everything, but I was curious to know with the SUPs if that was something that we could tie into and maybe get the SUP people that are together now and get them together and say, hey, look, is there something we may need to change, or is there a better way, or can you explain how this is working for the planning commission to understand the ones that are actually operating these facilities? Because I've had a great experience in mine. I mean, can't ask for any more than what I've had and the people that have come in and worked. But thank you for all your help and.
Yes, sir.
And sorry to put you on the spot right
No, no problem, because this is an issue that we've been talking about on the commission for
Long time.
several years. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You have. Thank you. You know, I think it makes it very tough living on site. Because, I mean, mine is a case that, you know, we have all the properties there, so we're living on site, but it's not actually the one piece of property, the other piece of property, the other piece of property. It's all connected in a way, but it's still each individual lot. You know, with having a caretaker on the property where neighbors could come to that person, whoever that may be, if there's a complaint and say, you know, and help out that way, I feel more comfortable with that than living in Florida and no one's here. And the neighbors are like, I don't know who to call. They're in Florida. I can't get them. And you know how that goes. But if a caretaker's on the property, then I can go to the caretaker, knock on the door and say, hey, this went on last night. And it may help ease the neighbors who are there. And I know with where it's located, you know, it's on Jamestown Road. So it's not in a neighborhood because I don't think it's connected to Kingswood. It's outside of Kingswood. If it was in the neighborhood of Kingswood, even though it's touching Kingswood, so it does concern the neighbors, and I understand that. And what you would, you know, get in your yard. And I went around to my neighbors that touch on the other side and let them know what I was doing and what was going on, and explain to them, you know, what I was trying to do there. And they were very supportive and with me on that. But I know there's always a concern with, and our biggest concern on this board has always been if it's in a neighborhood, will it disrupt the neighborhood? I found that it blends well, but that's my experience, and it may not be y'all. So I understand that, and you know, I'm sympathetic to that. That's just a few words I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Heppel. Anybody else would like to weigh in?
I'll just say that I personally would have less angst if you did live on the property. I appreciate what you're saying about a caretaker, if you lived behind it even, but your caretaker could get angry at you and leave, and then we've left the neighbors with no recourse. And frankly, I am in the middle of dealing with an issue in that neighborhood, and it gets very complicated because there is no HOA. And so so I'm it. And so it's very difficult to navigate that because people do want to look to their government to help them solve an issue when there is nobody in between. And so, you know, what is appealing is that it is out onto Jamestown Road with 2 bedrooms. I don't think you're going to increase traffic. You know, I don't think that there's going to be a accidents that's going to cause that. I've gone by the property. I go by it every day. It's a very cute house. Frankly, Ms. Dennis, tourism is up. We are almost back to our 2019 visitation here and working very hard to make sure that we are bringing more tourists in. And it is very appealing. I know my son, 30 years old, he is all about VRBO and Airbnb. I mean, that is, and he's not there to make life miserable for the neighbors. He's there to, you know, want to see a little different side of the place where he's staying, and to be able to stay in a home, to have access to kitchen, etc. So, where I've got my is the fact that you're not going to be an on-site property owner, and that just makes it very difficult for your neighbors. It puts them in the position of having to come speak to your caretaker, who's an employee of yours. And I understand, certainly respect your view on that, but but I wanted to let you know where I am on it. So, thank you.
Eisenhower?
Um,
Yeah,
Yeah, let Ruth go ahead.
Ms. Sadler,
Sue,
go ahead.
oh, thank you. And I appreciate your comments. I would hope that there's some way in the future addressing the comments about SUP holders not being contacted. Surely we have some means of knowing who was holding SUPs in case we need to get information that was mentioned. I would hope that in the future we would be able to accomplish that. My biggest concern, as Mr. Cross pointed out, and Mr. Kinsman reiterated, is the SUP is carried with the land. And I believe I read in the staff report that the Planning Commission members brought that up as well, and to Mr. Cross' point. But that is my biggest concern, that with these SUPs carrying, I wish we could attach them to the current owner or to the current business license or whatever licensing you have to operate an Airbnb. If it could be concurrent with that rather than following in perpetuity till the end of time with a piece of land, I would have a better feeling about it. But those are some of the concerns that I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sadler. Mr. Eisenhower?
Yeah, thank you. In full disclosure, I've stayed in 2 Airbnb. No, I take that back. I've stayed in 1 Airbnb. I have partied at another one. At my 50th reunion at the Air Force Academy, some of my classmates got a house in Colorado Springs and decided they were going to throw a big party for the squadron. I'm not sure how much the neighbors appreciated it, but that's the way they did business there. The one place where I've stayed has been here in Virginia, out at the lake, and it's been one where I have immediately available the owner of the property right there to be able to deal with, and I found it very, very satisfying, and I think that it worked in that it was a unique situation that was, if you will, part of a recreational area around a lake as opposed to a residential community. So it had a different feel. There are a couple of factors here that I think are really important for me, and Ms. Larson has touched on one of them. We have quite a few home neighborhoods, and typically the neighborhoods that tend to be more impacted by these are the older neighborhoods that the houses are reasonably priced, and that people want to buy them and put them into this kind of use. And they don't have a homeowners association. And what we're dealing with is not, I don't think, so much fear of somebody coming in and having a raucous party or disturbing the peace or creating a riot or whatever like that. I think it's a concern about what the expectations people had for their house and their community when they bought into it. Now, I live in a community that has a very tight covenant. And so I know what the expectation is. I know what can be happen and what can't happen. And there's a mechanism for us to take care of it. A lot of these older communities, you don't have that. You don't have a homeowners association. And so I think that's what I'm sympathetic to, is not so much that there's going to be real problems. It's just, it's an expectation of, is this a residential neighborhood that I bought into? Or is it being turned into, to a certain degree, a commercial operation? And that's, I think, where I hear the concerns of the folks in the neighborhood. When we go back to the comp plan, it's like anything else we do. It's a long process. We tried to get maximum participation. I can tell you that there are a lot of people that would love to have participated in it that didn't get to, or didn't for one reason or another or whatever. And I can also tell you that when we finally voted on this and approved it, that like any good document that a government body does, any person in this community can find something in it that they don't like. You never get everything you want. It's a compromise document. There are things in it that I don't like. But I think the big concern here for us is we are, in essence, the last line of defense for those neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, that do not have an HOA. And they come to us expecting help from us. And I think this was an attempt to provide some of that help. If this were one where the owner was on property, I would have no problem with it. I think that's one case. The difference between this is if this were to be set up as a rental where it was leased for maybe 6 months or a year by one individual, that's a completely different operation than somebody maybe every week or every 2 or 3 nights. And that makes a difference in how people view it. So it's not perfect, but I think that I would probably tend to support the Planning Commission's recommendation on this.
I'm going to just speak a little bit about this in terms of another issue that hasn't really been discussed to a great deal tonight, and that is that we're struggling in the county to figure out ways to address the affordability of housing for our employees, for those who are working in the community at relatively low wages, and those who are in the middle class. And to me, the real challenge here is figuring out the best way to make sure that we preserve the opportunity for people to be able to buy into housing. And much of that is going to be more likely to be at an affordable rate in communities of this kind. I know that there are issues about partying in various places. It doesn't just happen in timeshare. It doesn't just happen in these kinds of communities, but others as well. We've heard situations at timeshares and at hotels and other facilities where partying can get out of control. And I don't think that's really the most serious concern in this particular issue. What I'm concerned about is the idea that where Airbnb and other short-term rental options are available, I do like the idea of it being in an owner-occupied home, not just because then there's somebody who knows the lay of the land and can make sure that things are being properly handled and so forth, but also because to me, in this community, given the need to think about preserving affordability of our housing, that the most compelling argument for this kind of a situation is for the homeowner who may have difficulty maintaining a home to be able to participate in what's sometimes called the sharing economy, but where it is on the individual level. What I get more concerned about is the potential of this developing into a business whereby individuals accumulate a series of such homes for rental within the community, hire employees to work in those homes, which again becomes a challenge in some ways, and where we don't really have much ability to provide enforcement of the conditions that we sometimes impose through special use permits and our zoning codes. So for me, this particular instance is one that I can't support. I don't think that this provides us with the kind of model that we're looking for. My model would be more along the lines of something that Mr. Hipple is actually engaged in, where he is in a rural area, where it is adjacent to his own property and he can maintain close eye on what's happening there, but where it's a single residence available for short-term rental, and not the beginning of a broader enterprise that involves taking housing out of the availability of the purchase and rental on a long-term basis market. And so on that basis, I would not support this SUP. Okay, any other comments, any other discussion? Anybody would like to add? If not, do I have a motion?
Sue, have any?
She did have the opportunity to speak. Yeah, right. Sue, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you.
Do a motion for denial.
A motion to deny the application. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Aye.
Motion to deny, Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. I will now move on to SUP 210020, 528 Neckerland Road, tourist home.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Ms. Sharon Dennis has applied for a special use permit to allow the short-term rental of 2 bedrooms within a single-family home at 528 Neckerland Road. The property is zoned R8 rural residential and designated low-density residential on the comprehensive plan land use map and is located inside the primary service area. This SUP, if granted, would allow for short-term rentals throughout the year. No changes to the footprint of the home are proposed. Staff finds some favorable factors for this application, such as the presence of adequate off-street parking, and the applicant will obtain the proper licensing and inspections. However, the proposal does not meet the recommendations regarding locations for short-term rentals in the 2045 comprehensive plan. Staff finds the proposal incompatible with surrounding zoning and development and not consistent with the recommendations of the adopted 2045 comprehensive plan. Therefore, staff is unable to recommend approval of this application. At its December 1st meeting, the Planning Commission recommended denial of this application by a vote of 6-0. Should the Board of Supervisors approve this application, staff has included proposed conditions for consideration. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions for staff? The applicant is going to be the first in public hearings. Any questions? Okay. All right. Then I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And Sharon Dennis.
Does Mr. Croft get to?
Mr. Kraft, I'm sorry.
You go first?
Sorry, yes.
I'm just going to leave this here.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'll be very brief. Again, like the last application, the same discussion items, the rural designation on the zoning, the rural residential, did give pause to some of the commissioners that it was more removed from neighborhoods, but again, for the same reasons previously discussed, and the fact that the SUV conveys and that there's no sunset clause, we voted to recommend denial.
Any questions for Mr. Kraft? Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Dennis, thank you. You can come up.
My name is Sharon Dennis. I live at 100 St. George's Boulevard. All right, so where do we begin and end? After this, a drink, no matter how it turns out. All right, first of all, let me just open up with, unlike the previous applicant, at least I want to say this. Again, the zoning is a little bit different. So in this case, just to remind you that this is R8, rural residential. So even though it is in the PSA, eventually, even that which is rural outside of the PSA is going to be in the PSA. Because what I did notice in the Planning Commission was the comments about all of the new SUPs being given out for all of those new subdivisions that are going up in what is currently agricultural. And as we know, because I believe some of you know what New York, Long Island, places like that have already come and gone. I've seen it before, I'm seeing it coming. I moved here about 30 years ago, and I left Brooklyn as a kid knowing I wanted to see trees. I saw what they already did there. So in my young life, very different than what my family and everyone else wanted, I wanted the country. They thought there was something wrong with me. So I have lived in many places, and I was privileged to see those places before they became what you don't want to see Williamsburg become. But Williamsburg is becoming. So when I came here, I chose this particular property, I had to live somewhere. I had been homeless. I got it very cheaply. And everyone felt sorry for me because it was really not a very, very nice, little bungalow. I've tried to fix it up. In any case, I loved that it was surrounded by trees. I loved that it was near the water. And while other people enjoy the nice subdivisions, the big homes, and they went by those rules, I really enjoyed that I didn't have to answer to an HOA. I wanted to make it beautiful. I want to keep it beautiful. I was thrilled when the property right across the road that used to be wooded, I thought was going to turn into a subdivision, and instead it became, someone bought it, and they put a horse farm there, and it's lovely. And you have no residents. There's a lot of transient people that go and visit and come and go. So I guess when I spoke to the the Planning Commission, I had these pictures of the area, and I was able to present kind of the flavor of that particular property and that area. So it is not like the previous applicant. Now, I did read the planning board's suggestions. And again, I will say that when they did this exhaustive research, I do take question to it. They could have easily called any of us. This was most important, to call those experimentals that have already been done and the neighbors around them. They didn't do that. That would have been one of the best things they could have done. When I was told they put it in the newspaper and on buses, who rides bus? We're talking demographics. So when you're getting response, when you really want to find out how this impact is and what's taking place, what are your demographics? Well, if you're going to the newspaper, I can assure you the demographics on newspapers, I did pull them up, you got the 70-year-old and older crowd, even if they read it. And if it's on the buses, if you're in New York City, you can own a home, you can make a lot of money, you travel public transportation. The demographics here for anyone on a bus, unfortunately, is they don't have a car and they don't own homes. So when you're getting information about how does this really work, I only wish I had known about it. I did talk to people, but no one bothered to tell me. I spoke to Terry Costello. Let me know what's going on. Remember, it was COVID. I had friends very ill and dying. And so people were preoccupied during this exhaustive process. I think they made some mistakes, but obviously in the few more minutes I have, I can't go over those. We're talking about, in the last case, living on site. So much to tell. When my uncle passed away a few years ago, he was the commissioner of the Buildings Department of New York City. I like to mention him, very impressive. And I went to an Airbnb so I could stay somewhere nearby instead of a hotel. I'll tell you about on-site, with the owner living on-site. It's not always as safe as you think it is. First of all, do you think they're babysitting or are we monitoring? Monitoring, in case we have forgotten, there's technology, like a baby monitor. You don't have to be on site to see everything going on and respond to it. In fact, the technology is probably better than on site. But when I went on site to this one property, it was a very big mansion of a home, and it was the downstairs, and I got in there. Well, that gentleman, it was not flattering. I was at a funeral. Started to ask me in the night, call me, why don't you come upstairs so we could have drinks? I never want to stay in a place where the owner is living there, okay? So I don't. Nor would I find it comfortable for me to be the babysitter to someone, that wants privacy when they come to this kind of thing. So I wanted to speak to that, but trying to be, let's see the word. Anyway, so I'm going to read off what is stated in the zoning. And it said, R8 is intended for application to rural areas of the county, which remain inside the primary service area. I'm going to skip. The district is intended to maintain a rural environment suitable for farming, forestry, low-density rural residents, together with certain recreational and public, semi-public, and institutional uses. In this, it does allow for one of its many uses with a special use permit is a tourist home. which, like I've told you, I'm already operating on. In the comprehensive plan, they have written, if located within a residential context, a short-term should serve to complement the residential character of the area rather than altering its nature. Therefore, while every location can be considered uniquely, and that's what I'm hoping we can do here, short-term rentals are most appropriately located subject to the following development standards. One of them is being located on lands designated rural lands, which this is, even though it is in the public, in the PSA. Be located on the edge or corner of an existing platted subdivision rather than internal to it. Be located on a major road. I believe several conditions of the comp plan are met by this enterprise on this particular property. The property on Nickel Land Road, again, R8 zoned, is designated rural. It's basically on a major through. It's not an internal. It's not internal to a subdivision or residence. In fact, it's far away from any residential development. And I do believe because of that, it meets several of these criteria that the comprehensive plan was trying to establish. Tourist homes, as I mentioned, are permitted with a special use permit. Under this section 24-347 and so forth, it's intended for the application to rural areas of the county which remain inside the primary service areas where utilities and urban services are planned, not yet fully available, and where urban development may be expected in the near future. The district is intended to maintain a rural environment suitable for farming, and it goes on. So I believe in this particular case, this property does meet the standards of what the comprehensive plan was trying to attain. I may not currently live on the property, but I live within minutes, and it means a lot to me. So I want my property to have the ability to keep itself preserved and so forth. What I haven't touched upon is what I'm going to try to read off very quickly. In the comprehensive plan, it says that the short-term rental is an emerging alternative to hotels and timeshares. Let us be aware of anti-competitive practices, choosing one business over another. So when in their plan they say they want it pushed out to the agricultural areas, well, those agricultural areas, as we speak, are going through the process of becoming exactly, the urban spread. And I don't think that's legal. So anyway, R8 zoning requires conditions intended to protect the residential nature of the surrounding area. Necco Land, this particular property, it is rural. I'm trying to keep it rural. Up and down the road, we're losing that. I had pointed out, because I know you're talking about, affordable housing, and I appreciate that. Again, I was that single parent. I was homeless. I have made my homes available to those all along, that single moms. I tried taking care of them. I almost lost my properties because of that, because low-income renters tend to not be able to afford it, don't take care of things, and you could actually lose the property. What then happens to those properties is, and I took this, this is from New York, and this was a picture. I'm sorry we don't have it up. It's a beautiful little cottage that used to be in Queens, New York, and I know because I used to go out and visit that particular area. It was like country. What happened is, and here's what they say, the house, which was never updated, because they can't afford it, was sold a few years ago and was demolished, and a huge structure, which takes up the whole property, was built. So much to say, so little time. What I noticed on that road, as I have loved it, and I've been there for 20 plus years, is, yeah, I mentioned John Ryan Homes. They did take down the sign where they were, proudly presenting $500,000 and you too can move in. So what you're getting without being able to take some of this, this housing units, as we'll call them, and preserving them, to have people be encouraged to recoup some of their monies, if in fact, indeed, They can restore these buildings, and yes, even in longevity, if they're actually retained to keep this image of Williamsburg, that will disappear because money talks. They're not going to keep these houses because it doesn't make sense financially. So they're not going to be in the pool of affordable housing. They're going to tear them down. They're going to put up bigger and bigger, like the John Ryan homes. So I know I've been a little bit all over the place. I'm looking at this time, and it's killing me that I cannot answer all of your concerns. I know that this particular property, if any of you have been down there, we have a pump house across the street, we have an alarm system, we have the horse farm. I have a neighbor right now who does the short-term rental. I have a neighbor on the other side of me who did, and I was told by Terry Costello she could call it in because she was still at work. And they're very supportive of me, both as a neighbor and in doing an enterprise like this, because I've helped them to fix up their place, as well as I always keep good care of mine. I know there's some concern about this sunset clause. I know legally, yes, an SUP runs with the land, but we can say the same thing of long-term rentals or selling property and what it's going to do. I wish I could go through, like I said, I know I'm not gonna have that much time. So many concerns, so little time for discussion, but I do believe that we're just missing, this is actually the unforeseen benefit to our community. I think the concerns that we have are unwarranted. I think I could, if I had a chance while you were speaking, to speak to each subject matter that came up of concern. You know, the boogeyman is in town, or what this can do to the community. I think this will enhance the community. I think it will save the community, at least in part. At least in part. And I do think that a lot of the concerns that you hear, it's very, very common. When things change and we can't see the future, we're afraid. How do we stop it? And I don't believe that we have the input from others that could see a different future here. It is going to grow. We are going to have way too much traffic, more schools, faster traffic, more rude people. And I don't know that Williamsburg is going to be the little community that I've been so lucky to live in communities before they become this. I just want to hold on to pieces of it. I do. And as far as having more of them, I've already stated, if I could get these old buildings and fix them up and make sure they would stay in perpetuity, you know, that they could always be available for people to at least see, what did old Williamsburg look like before the big properties took over? But also, we're renovating these places, I want to say restoring these places, and they're available in the future, because not everyone wants to do this. I mean, God knows I'm tired, but, you know, this would be then restored homes available that I guarantee will not be available in the future. Please don't kill me tonight. That's it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Gail Fisher?
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say I live at 3102 London Company Way, and I support Sharon Dennis and her Airbnbs because I clean them sometimes, and she has helped me watch my kids when she had a daycare center. And if it weren't for her this past Christmas, my kids probably wouldn't have gotten anything because I cleaned her Airbnbs, and she's, you know, I support her with these because they're very nice, and it's a nice little side job. And Sharon is like one of the nicest people I know. She helps anybody and everybody. I've never seen anybody so giving in my life. Like one of those houses that's a Airbnb, the one on Neckaland, she let somebody stay there, and they were supposed to pay her rent, and they lived there for, I don't know, a few months, and they didn't pay her, and they tore it all up. So, you know, nobody tears up anything when there's, you know, when they're coming for a couple of days at a time. They're just happy to be in Williamsburg. But the long-term rental thing doesn't look too good, because that's happened to two of her places.
And I just think it's a good idea, and she's got, a nice little area for people to visit. And I think she should be allowed to do it. I just think, it's a good thing. And she takes very, very good care of her properties. That's all I really got to say. I'm just standing behind her, and I hope she can do it because she's helping people. She's making money off of it where she can help people, and she reaches out to people and helps them all the time. She's a really good person. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you.
Emily Huffman.
Hi again, Emily Huffman, 2032 Back River Lane. We also still own the property at 530 Necco Land, which is directly next door to Sharon. So to address the concerns about the neighbors, we are the neighbors, and we are fully in support of Sharon operating her home as an Airbnb. We run the front half of 530 as an Airbnb, and like Mr. Hipple here, we have nothing but good experiences to report from that. We've had great people come to stay. We've had people from all over the country. We've had nothing but good reviews. We have spoken with Sharon and with the neighbors on the other side of us who have had nothing but positive things to say to us. They've noticed the improvements we've been able to make to the exterior of our home. So we are the neighbors. We're happy to have Sharon operate her Airbnb. As the neighbors, we have also lived next door to when Sharon was running her home for long-term tenants. And we have seen the destruction of her house. We have seen the destruction of her property for people who were not caring with her piece of land. And that's a difficult place to be in when you are renting a property long-term at a lower price point, because we're there as well. So we also have long-term tenants on 530, and we do rent those out at a lower price point, and we have had our own property demolished. And we know the hardship of that, because every time you've got to pick up the pieces and try to put your house back together. We have never once had to do that with our Airbnb guests. The worst they've left it is some dirt on the floor or maybe some dirty dishes. And that's far easier to deal with than, holes in the wall. So we do not foresee short-term renters being a detriment to this neighborhood. Necco Land is a really unique place because, yes, we're not in an HOA. We are a very country-feeling road. We have the horse farm across the street, which people love. They love coming and looking across the street and seeing people riding their horses. So we have this feel of being out in the country where you can relax and you can walk over to the parkway and see the back river, but you're 5 minutes from town. It is such an ideal location for people visiting Williamsburg because they get all the benefits of being close to town and seeing everything they want to see, but they get to get away from the hustle and bustle to go relax for the evening with their family. What else do I have written down here? Pardon me getting into my phone here. I will say the opportunities provided for us having an SUP on Necco Land, I've listed some of them previously, is we've been able to improve upon the exterior of our home. We've been able to make improvements on the interior of our home. I have been able to be a stay-at-home mom with my kids, which especially during the pandemic years was a huge benefit to our family, to have me be at home and not have to worry about, daycare during COVID. So I have really appreciated the opportunity to run a short-term rental. We've also been able to hire a local landscaper. We've been able to hire a local cleaner. So we are supporting other local Williamsburg business owners because we have these short-term rentals running. So I fully support Sharon doing this. I really hope you allow for it. Necco Land is a great place for people to visit and get the charm of Williamsburg. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huffman. Scott Bergeron.
Once again, Scott Bergeron, 5821 Painted Leaf Lane, Naples, Florida. as we go through and we address the comprehensive plan like we spoke before, I fully agree with it. Your own zoning ordinances don't fall in line with your comprehensive plan. Throughout the zoning ordinance that you go through, they don't fall in line with it. You go, it's allowable, but it's not allowable because comprehensive plan. At the Planning Commission, I can tell you right now, I don't care what SUP comes in front of the Planning Commission, if it's outside of the comprehensive plan, the answer is no. Whether it's in zoning or not, you might as well take it out of the zoning ordinance. If you're gonna not accept any special use permits, then take it out of the zoning ordinance. Allow it. As far as homeowners associations go, I fully agree. They are to protect a neighborhood, and to protect that neighborhood. However, what right or what say does a homeowners association have to say with a long-term rental? What do they have to say? They can come knock on your door, you know? As far as the tenants living on site or the owner living on site, when you stay at a Marriott, do you talk to Mr. Marriott when you have a problem? Or do you talk to one of his employees? He's an employee nonetheless the same. When you stay at a bed and breakfast, typically the owner of the bed and breakfast isn't there. I'm sure there are occasions that they are there. Usually it's the staff that represents them. Their closest neighbor at 528 in Echoland is an Airbnb. So I would say that pretty much fits in the neighborhood. Their closest neighbor to them. I just like you to take that into consideration, all those things. As far as, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, sir.
Glennon.
McGlynn. As far as Mr. McGlynn had said, you know, the sharing of the houses and the affordability, people that own Airbnbs aren't going to sell an Airbnb. It's not. Home prices are based on comparable market sales. Comparable market sales are what drives the market, what people are willing to pay for a house. Airbnbs aren't selling and bringing values of houses up. There's only 14 SUPs, I believe, in all of James City County right now for Airbnbs. Yet there's 1,400 in operation. So you're missing out on, let's see, 1,440 or 35, right, of tax dollars to the government. To support, they're not paying bed tax. They're taking that money. They might be paying their Virginia state tax if they're doing it through Airbnb and not another, you know, enterprise. But they're taking that bed tax and they're putting it in their pocket. So, thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's all the speaker cards that I have. I will close the public hearing. Look to the board for direction. Anybody have anything?
Yeah, go ahead. You.
No, I'm good.
I'm good too.
All right, well, do we have a motion?
Motion to deny.
Is a motion to deny the application? Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
No.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. That concludes the public hearings for this evening. We'll now move on to board considerations. The first item is the appeal of a notice of violation, 5032 River Drive. Ms. Parman.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, before you are 4 appeals of violations of the county's erosion and sediment control and stormwater management ordinances on residential property located at 5032 River Drive. Staff cited both the property owner, Mr. Danny Patterson, and contractor R.A. Coleman for failure to obtain permits for land disturbing activity on the property, resulting in the rear yard collapsing into Diaskin Creek. Both Mr. Patterson and Mr. Coleman, through their attorneys, have agreed to accept the violations as detailed in your agenda packet. Staff recommends that the board adopt the 4 proposed resolutions finding Mr. Patterson and R.A. Coleman in violation of County Code Sections 8-4 and 8-22. Your approval will allow the county to continue with settlement negotiations and potentially file an enforcement action if needed in circuit court. And I'm happy to answer questions, and I will say that Mr. Roberts and Mr. Bean are both here on behalf of their clients.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Ms. Parman?
You feel fairly, I have faith in Mr. Roberts. I don't know the other person, sorry. But you have, you feel as though that we will be able to move forward and that you will be able to work towards a settlement, I assume?
Honestly, I can't say for certain. I don't know, but the resolutions before you affirm the violation, so therefore, if we needed to file something in circuit court, I could go ahead and do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
The silt that's filled in the creek right there, what will happen with?
We're asking that they remove the discharge into the creek. Of course, it's been, 6, 7 months since that happened, so I'm not entirely sure what that will look like. I know VMRC is also asking for that, so they might be coming right behind us to demand that same thing.
Any other questions? Ms. Sadler, anything?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Prime.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Move the motion?
I'll just say a word or two if I may.
sorry, I guess.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I do want to say one word. Greg Bean, Gordon and Reese, 5425 Discovery Park Boulevard, Suite 200. I represent Danny Patterson. I just did want to put on the record, we have come to an agreement. Mr. Patterson doesn't believe that he did anything wrong. He believed he followed the rules, but he's wanting to work toward a settlement. He knows this is a good faith effort, a good step to do that. It will allow us to continue negotiations. We're working with insurance carriers, with the neighbors and other parties to come to a settlement agreement. So while Mr. Patterson doesn't believe he did anything wrong, we are working with the county and we do approve this resolution to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
I'm Steve Roberts, 905 Richmond Road. I represent R.A. Coleman. I too would ask that the board adopt the resolution, although I'm not certain with all the emails that have gone back and forth with Ms. Parman, if it includes language that suggests this was not an intentional act or an act to try and improve the property or to dump fill from another site. It was an accident, and it involved Mr. Patterson hiring Mr. Coleman, try and stabilize the bank. That effort had failed. Other measures were taken, and eventually fill was placed that caused what can only be described as an avalanche. In working with the county and with Mr. Bean, I have had negotiations with Mr. Coleman's insurance carrier, and the language of negligent or unintentional violation would be very helpful in making sure that coverage is available to fund the settlement. Policies don't often cover intentional acts. You may or may not know Mr. Coleman's been in business for 30 years without any types of violations. It's requested by Mr. Patterson to do something as this property eroded. He has no prior violations of this kind, and he continues to work with Mr. Patterson through Mr. Bean to resolve this issue, which includes removal of any of the fill or other detritus that have fallen into the water. If the board's not familiar with this stretch of Diaskin, it's been a problem with or without human intervention as this bank has slowly eroded because water levels have risen. And by the time we get to the resolution, the title action may have solved some of this, but not resolved the fact that this was caused by an attempt to stop the erosion, not create a problem. So other than hopefully including that language in the resolution, we ask that you adopt it.
And I could agree that, that I know Mr. Coleman does a great job, running a great business, does wonderful work, and it never gets into any of this type of situation that I've known of for the years he's been in business and have worked closely with him on certain things. He usually watches everything, makes sure he's got all his T's crosses and his I's dotted and that sort of thing. But I wouldn't, your first statement, I wouldn't consider this an accident. It just didn't fall out of the truck. It was placed there. So, as far as accidents go, I wouldn't
the biggest accident would be the erosion of the bank from years, because as the creek turns right there, it eats away that bank. And that's been that way for quite a few years. That bank's been slowly eroding away. But, you know, I definitely don't want to, you know, have Mr. Coleman's, you know, company tarnished in any way of, you know, I know he'd called me and after all this was going on and it appeared to be he was trying to help mitigate the situation of the bank eroding. And then the storms came and, you know, the soil wasn't exactly the right soil and you know, slowly slipped into the creek. But I wouldn't classify this as an accident.
I might have misspoke, Mr. Hippel, not accident, but in unintentional or negligent was the word that we were hoping would be included, because that would be covered under a general liability policy. I don't want to smirch Nationwide, but generally they'll try their best to find a way, if they can, not to pay the claim, and that funding is the source of the settlement in this matter. And it was unintentional, not accidental, and perhaps negligent, although that's a term of art, I would suggest. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. And let me just, in order to be clear on this,
Go ahead.
let me go ahead and read the clause in the resolution that addresses this question. It says, whereas the Board of Supervisors is of the opinion that the negligent acts of the appellant resulted in the violation of the county code. Just to make clear that that is the statement that is in our resolution in front of us.
I would just like to make one comment, because I litigate, and so negligent has a very specific term. I think unintentional is more appropriate.
Well, you know, quite honestly, you know, I saw the materials that were provided to us in relation to this case, and again, we are talking about the opinion of the Board of Supervisors. In my opinion, this was not just an accident that could have been prevented in some other way. There are questions relating to the acquisition of permits properly to address this particular job, and there is a pretty significant and sort of stunning photographic evidence of the result of the actions. So I'll leave it to our...
Because it doesn't, perhaps we're not at a place where...
I'd ask that the board pass the resolutions as written with the language of negligent, not unintentional. Those are two different terms of art, but if I was to file a lawsuit, I don't want the phrase unintentional in our resolutions, because our code addresses negligent behavior acts and does not address unintentional acts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts, comments? Ms. Sadler, do you have anything you wanted to ask or say?
No, I'm good. My questions were answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if it's the will of the board, then we have 4 resolutions that would address these particular issues, and I'd ask if there is a motion to adopt the 4 resolutions affirming the violations of the erosion and sediment control and stormwater management ordinances stemming from the negligent acts of Danny Patterson and R.A. Coleman.
Move.
Okay, we have a motion moved by Mr. Eisenhower to adopt the 4 resolutions that were included in the packet, which were revised to correct the identification of the article number in county code that was referenced in the resolution from Article 1 to Article 2. Is that right? Yes. Right, okay. All right. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us now to the next item, which is on the authorization of additional positions with the Fire Department. Chief Ash, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Excuse me. Before you this evening for your consideration is a resolution authorizing 9 additional full-time firefighter positions in the department. We recognize that that request is large and not something we take lightly. So we wanted to provide you some overview of kind of the data collection and the analysis that got us to the point to make a recommendation to you. So you may remember back in 2017, we were before the board talking about staffing challenges at the time, increasing use of mutual aid from the city of Williamsburg, response times in some areas that eventually led to the discussions of Fire Station 6. The following budgets after that led us to begin a slow transition to increase our staffing to get ready for Fire Station 6. And at the time when COVID hit in the spring of 2020, we had already hired 12 of those 18 positions that were planned for Fire Station 6. Of course, not knowing what the outcome was going to be, the Station 6 project was ultimately put on hold. However, we had those 12 positions. In discussion that I had with Mr. Stevens at the time was to enable to use those to address some of our other initiatives we had in the strategic plan, primarily to shift some of that load that some of the stress we were placing on the city of Williamsburg system, often coming in to support us. So just want to give you a little bit of that background to kind of catch up from where we were in 2017 when we showed you a lot of graphs and charts to compare to where we are today. So first, our minimum operational need today, which includes some additional staffing that we did, additional daily positions in 2020 and again earlier in 2021, which were related to allowing us to move our run orders to reduce mutual aid from Williamsburg. We also had an additional fire engine out of Fire Station 3. So if we put 3 people in each of those fire trucks, 2 on the ambulances, 1 battalion chief, a shift commander, and an EMS supervisor, it gets us to 32 people is our minimum operational need for the day. If we have fully staffed, again, we have 3 shifts. So if we have fully staffing, we have 37 positions that are budgeted for each of those shifts. So that gives us 5 more than we need. However, we've averaged 5 people on leave. If we go back and look at our leave policy, it's been in effect since the 1980s. And that allows 4 people on vacation leave, and then we always have someone off, either sick or family sick. So when we review our historical data that I'll show you in a second, we average out to being 5. So that puts us at our 32 a day. However, you know from our discussions we've had previously, we're never 100% full. We always have vacancies. We'll have people on light duty for injuries or FMLA, military leave, something else. And a review of our historical data that will show you averages that out to be another 3 per shift that were always unavailable or out of place to work. So I show you this not to give you an eye exam to see if you can read all the daily details there, but basically I want to show you that this is the kind of level of analysis and detail we look at this. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't a leave problem. So the top graph is our vacation leave by day over the last 5.5 fiscal years, and you can see that it's relatively flat. And the bottom graph there is our sick leave, again, which is sick leave or family sick leave, and again, that's relatively flat. So when we addressed this problem, we wanted to make sure that we knew that it wasn't a leave-related issue, that suddenly we allowed more people off, and now that's why we were upside down, that basically it's remained flat. And if we take that data back many more fiscal years, we see that same trend. So that's where we get that average of 5 on leave. Our next slide, so that was by day. I apologize for the switch from by day to sort of by fiscal year here. But we track firefighters who works on a shift. Their pay cycle is 3 weeks in length. And every pay period, we look at all of our uniform positions and who's available to work, who's on light duty, who's on military, who's in training, what are the vacancies. So what we did is we've got this data back to 2012, and we compiled, kind of averaged all those together by fiscal year to look at the reasons why people are out of place. So this is in addition to the leave per day. These are people that are either vacant, they're out on military leave. Obviously, you see vacancies in recruit training are probably the 2 primary areas. If you remember from our discussions in 2017, our recruit training from the time we have a vacancy all the way through them actually working at a fire station again takes us almost 9 months. It's about 6 months of training, and we have the period of time to do applications and background checks and all those things we do. So if you look at that again over that same time period, 5.5 or so fiscal years, it averages out to be a little more than 9 people. Again, if you break that into across all 3 shifts, that's about 3 per shift. So that's where we get the 5 on leave, and then the 3 others per shift always unavailable to work. And again, if we take this data all the way back to 2013, into 2012, beginning of 2013, we see that very similar trend. So there's times where we have, like we are today, there's 14 people out of place, either due to vacancies or training. And there's times where there's only a couple out of place. And if we average that out over those 5.5 fiscal years, again, it's around 9 people. So I think it's important to know that the positions we're proposing are not to add something new. It's sort of just to be able to sustain and maintain our current level of staffing in the community. And at the bottom there, it mentions the average vacancy rate. And again, over that period of time, we typically have carried a vacancy rate of, on average, of about 2.85. And that'll be important later when we look at what's the cost of these positions, authorization versus cost. So this graph is very similar to one I showed you in 2017. The green line at the top there is authorized or budgeted positions. And you can see that that began to stair step up. That's when we were adding the additional positions for Fire Station 6. The blue dotted line is how we get to our minimum operational need. This is across all 3 of our shifts, kind of looking at the department as a whole. And then our red line is those that are available to work. So we take that every pay period and subtract who's missing, and we look at how many people are available to work. And you notice during the time as our green line started moving up, we had those additional positions that were planned for Fire Station 6, but we weren't staffing any additional equipment yet. We didn't open the fire station. We hadn't increased any of our staffing. So you'll see many times there where our red line was above or well above our blue line. That's very good for us. That means overtime is extremely low, and we're able to staff. That allows us to do some training on duty and things like that that don't impact overtime. At the time period, you'll see at the beginning of that graph and at the end of that graph, where that red line is below our dotted line, that results in overtime for us to fill back to our minimum staffing. So what does that look like if we kind of break that into all 3 shifts? Again, we operate 3 shifts at our fire stations. Shift is 24 hours. So we take those 37 budgeted positions, we remove the 5 that are on leave, that gets us to 32, and the green's around that because that's what we're budgeted for today. What we're not budgeted for are the other 3 per shift for a total of 9 that are always out of place, and we can show you 6 to 8 years worth of data showing that that same number is always out of place. So that puts us down at 29. So every morning when we get ready to start our shift, we're to 29 people working. Our need is 32, so it results in us hiring those people back on overtime. The impact of that is not just in dollars and cents, though. I think we've seen right now is when we've had that temporary shift with extra positions for Fire Station 6. When that went away, we're no longer able to cover our leave and unavailable positions with on duty, resulting in that overtime. What we found is that our generation of workforce has changed. They value work-life balance much more so than previous generations did. Unique to the fire department is work 24-hour shifts. So if you work on a Tuesday and work on a Thursday, and you're on overtime or mandatory overtime on Wednesday, you're there for 72 hours in a row without going home. Sometimes it's 48, but very often our folks are held 72 hours. We do take an attempt to get volunteers to work overtime first. It's voluntary, but since earlier in 2021, we had to implement a mandatory overtime list, which means we tell you on pre-schedule, this is the day that if no one else volunteers to work, you can't go home. Or sometimes, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, we tell you we don't have enough people for today, and you can't leave the fire station. So we're evaluating sort of a possible connection between increase in accidents and injuries with the volumes of mandatory overtime, 72-hour effect, all those things that could be playing. We don't have a lot of data about that yet, but we recognize that that increases fatigue, which increases the opportunity for some of those things. And I think it's also important to mention that our folks are also required to work overtime in addition to just staffing. There's always continuing education requirements to maintain their certifications. We have to support the Regional Fire Academy to get those recruits trained so we can get them and get our numbers back up. And we always want them to work on their professional development to make sure they're hitting their career ladder goals or eligible for promotion opportunities as they present themselves. So when we get back to, again, this is that same time period, 2017 through now, so 5.5 fiscal years. This is the people per day working overtime. So you'll see we're up around 3 or 4. In the middle there, we drop down to 1 or 2. And then at the end here, we increase back up to 3 or 4. That time period in the middle is when we had those additional positions that were planned for Station 6. If we look at that in a dollars and cents standpoint, back in fiscal year 2017, we spent $1.2 million in overtime. You notice that in 18, 19, and 20, we dropped that number to down around $600,000 per year. Again, that's that same time period. when we had those additional positions. And now that we've used those staff positions for our minimum operational need, that overtime rate is back up around, expected to be $1.2 million, or over $1 million this year. This year, we're going to fund that difference through general fund savings. However, it does exceed our overtime budget so far for this year. If we were to go back to the graph earlier with the red, the green, and the blue, we've kind of discussed that we've really got to do one of two things. We either need to keep moving the green line up, which should drag the red line with it, or we've got to agree to take something out of service. We can't maintain our current level of service. We'll have to drop one of those units out of service, which unfortunately shifts that responsibility for that response unit, because we still need them to respond to calls in James City County, back most likely to the city of Williamsburg. So again, we're looking at about a $600,000 difference in overtime spending when we had extra people versus not. And this is a difficult graph to advance. Can you advance one slide?
We lost our IT department apparently.
Just one slide. So I recognize this is a very horrible graph to look at, so I preface that. But what I wanted to really do was line up the money and the people available and all those things over top each other in the exact same time frame to really show that when the overtime dropped by half, it's when we had the extra people. As soon as the extra people were being used to staff fire apparatus on a daily basis, the overtime spending went right back up. So our proposal for the 9 firefighters is to offset that number that's on average unavailable. We know that we're never going to eliminate all of our overtime. Our hope was to get that back to a reasonable number. 1 or 2 a day is a manageable number for us without mandatory overtime, without all those sort of other impacts that aren't just dollars and cents that our people are dealing with now to staff and keep our equipment staffed on a daily basis. When we look at that, I'll try again. Give me one more slide, Jason. Thank you. So we really kind of evaluate what the 2 options, right? If taking something out of service or reducing our response capability wasn't an option, we've either got to add the additional positions or fund the additional overtime. I don't believe the overtime option is sustainable. I think those are short-term things, but not sustainable long-term. As long as I've been in the fire department, we've always had overtime. There's times we've had a lot of overtime, like we've experienced here in the last 6 or 8 years. Again, minus that dip when we had those extra positions. And I think we found that it's just not sustainable for the future. At times we've talked about it's cheaper to pay the overtime because we don't have the benefits cost associated with additional positions. However, we worked with Human Resources and FMS, and we talked about what's really the impact of those 9 positions. And I think you'll see on the slide there that average firefighter, a new recruit firefighter, is about $70,000 in salary and benefits. Times 9 gets us to that $630,000. But because we always carry some vacancy rate, as Ms. Day's team pointed out to us, we really need permission for 9, but most likely you'll never fund all 9 at the same time because you're always going to carry some vacancy rate. So I think when we look at what's the real cost of the authorization for 9 additional people, it's cheaper than the overtime and it's cheaper than that spending delta we've had in those years with additional folks. So we recognize that it's a large ask. I typically stand at this podium in front of you and talking about replacing ladder trucks and engines and ambulances, and we can't do any of those things without these folks. And I think it's just important to know we're not trying to add a program or add something or staff something additional. We're really just trying to keep what we have adequately staffed without adding additional, without all the overtime occurrences. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'd like to chime in real quick because it's very, I appreciate especially this last slide. You bring home a very, very salient point. Airline business is not a whole lot different. You can run an airline on overtime or you can run it with staffing. And we find that ultimately running it on overtime, companies think, well, we save it because with all the benefits, it's easier. You already got somebody whose benefits are paid for. We're just getting more, bringing more out of them. But there's a limit to what you can do with that. And I think it's a false economy. So I think this is even without your vacancies there, it's about a wash.
Yes, sir.
And to me, I'd rather have it properly staffed so that you're not burning your people out for the same money than to do it with fewer people and paying overtime. So I'm completely supportive of what you're trying to approve.
Conversation I had with Mr. Stevens and Mr. Ronheimer when we discussed this earlier was a month or so ago was I got to pay for it one place or the other.
Absolutely.
Either pay for it in the overtime account or try to pay for it out of the salary account. And I think it's important to mention that these numbers are for a year. That's a
Yes.
fiscal year. The dollar amount in the resolution, the memo tonight, is based on hiring 5 of those folks in February and then hiring the other 4 in April. We have a hiring list that we should be able to get 5 out of, and then the other 4 would be in the April timeframe. So if you're wondering why that says 600 and 430, but then the memo says 200,000, that's the difference there.
Yeah, Chief, we're looking at positions, 430,500, and overtime, 600,000. 70 more thousand would give us 10 people and still save us almost 100,000, roundabout.
We try to do everything in threes,
Right.
in groups of 3s because of the 3 shifts. We've typically tried to look at 3, 6, 9. We weren't ready to make an ask for 12. We felt like our data supported between 9 and 10, and didn't support all the way to 12.
But I mean, with 10, we would still have savings in the long run, but 10 would give us that sick leave, person or training person or, that's going to be out and that sort of thing to help cover the 9 constantly at work as much as possible. That one would give you, I'd support the 9, but I'd support 10 too. I mean, I know fire service and I know what y'all do and how important it is for our community. And spending in overtime, just like we went through this several years back, we found we were losing money in overtime, burning our people out, causing more issues and that sort of thing with overtime than we were with, nine's a big ass, but probably the county administrator is like, oh my gosh, what's he saying? Add another person.
I didn't want to look at him
killing my
yet.
budget. That's why I'm not looking in that direction. But yeah, I would have no problem with 9. I would love to see 10, but we can only afford but so much, and we're still saving in the long run overtime, and we're protecting our people, and where accidents happen when you're too tired and then next thing you know, there's problems at home because they're spending so much time at the firehouse, as it always happens at home. And if we keep our people fresh and ready to roll, we're better off in the long run. We'll have a stronger team.
And I think voluntary overtime is one thing. When you're having to operate with mandatory overtime, yeah, it's something we need to do better than that. So I'm totally supporting your
Break sometime.
First of all, thank you for the data.
If I could jump in for just a minute, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say I agree with Mr. Eisenhower and Mr. Hippel. Chief, I just always want to take an opportunity to thank you all for everything you do, especially the past few years. My goodness, kudos to everything you've been doing. Totally supportive of whatever you need to make sure we're well covered. And I think you do an amazing job making sure you do it in the confines of our budget and everything that we can afford. And I just wanted to give you a shout out and thank you. Please tell everyone in the fire department that we appreciate all they do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Appreciate the data that you have presented. I think that is so important when you're talking about this type of issue. I did wonder, though, you mentioned that your leave policy had been in place since the 80s. Have you looked at looking at that? Have you looked at looking at that?
Yes, ma'am. That's a question our folks frequently ask us. Matter of fact, in our internal discussions about this position request, folks have asked, does that get us the 5th person a day off? And, we've been cautious to say, we recognize that out of 37 people, how many can you allow off? What's reasonable? The policy was based on when we had 4 fire stations, now having a 5th. It doesn't account for that on normal vacation leave. The issue we have is we haven't been able to adequately cover the positions that are off already with our vacation leave at 4. We are hesitant to add vacation spots.
Yeah, I think I was talking about going down? To say,
Less.
have you looked at saying 3 people off as opposed to 4, just because you've had this problem?
Gotcha. We have, and there are times where we restrict the leave below that. Obviously, like other impacts, that has a negative impact as well.
Sure.
You can do that for a little while before you start to see sick leave go up.
Yeah.
You start to see other effects, and I'm not saying our folks will call it sick when they're not, but there are days where you just need a break, especially on top of holding mandatory overtime. Then I tell you, you can't take days off.
Right.
It's sort of a never-ending battle there.
Okay. The other question I was wondering, with looking at the position, how does that compare, $70,000, and I'm assuming that is including, that's all in?
Salary and benefits.
Yes. What does that compare with our neighbors? And are we in a position where we're bringing people on, they're going to the training, are they jumping ship to go somewhere else for a higher pay? Or because, the question's twofold, because I'd like to know that, but there is a higher budget impact the longer people stay with us as well. I mean, I think that this is justified, but I'd like to know, do we pay enough, or are we losing people?
Sure. I think Mr. Stevens has talked to you about salary across the county as a whole, and I would leave that discussion better suited for him than I. However, tell you that I would say some of our neighbors are a little less than us. Some of our neighbors are more than us. That's something we're always evaluating. When we were here before you in 2016 and 2017, at the time, specifically our career ladder and our advanced life support to pay our intermediates and paramedics was well below our partners. At the time, I said, hey, if we can redo this career ladder, here's the cost associated. We'll be able to recruit folks and retain folks, because we were losing people to our neighboring jurisdictions. We're still losing people, and I suspect that as long as I'm the fire chief and as long as anybody's the fire chief, we're always going to lose some folks. What I've seen is we're losing more folks to changing careers completely. Go work on a job that's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, that doesn't have the negative effects of shift work, being home at night as they start to have kids, those types of things that we've seen people leave for, not leaving for money like we were before. I think that's one of those, what I've seen across the region is one bumps up, everybody kind of catches, then someone else bumps up and everybody tries to catch. And that's probably a game we'll always play. And I think Mr. Stevens had those discussions as well across the county, and I'd leave that for him. But I would say that today when we lose folks, it's typically to changing jobs, more so than I went to get $1,000 for medic pay, or I went to get those specifics. But salary is one of those difficult questions to answer. Do you think you're paid enough?
Well, never.
It's always a difficult question to ask.
Thank you.
Ms. Larson, if I could add on, I think the chief answered adequately for fire, but I would like to add on, and I've talked sort of individually about concerns with salaries. My hope is to do that more in the retreat time with you. But I know the police chief had asked about salaries. We talk about that. They have very good data of about 19 agencies. We ranked 3rd from the bottom when we come out of the academy. So I think fire is better off overall as comparison to other than police might be today. But I can tell you, we can't hire convenience center attendants. Our full-time salary, we're talking about coming back to you and making full-time pay being a minimum of $12 an hour. City of Williamsburg is already at 15. So when you talk about my convenience center folks or my grounds folks, we're trying to get them for 12 or 13 an hour. We just can't get them. We get into our planner staff. We've got vacancies in planning, and we're not retaining planners. Again, it's not always about the money, but I can tell you we're not competitive. We have jobs that sit out there and just don't have applicants for months and months. And so that might be the market in general, but it is really a challenge for us in terms of a lot of departments, not just the public safety arena. It is broader than that across our workforce. And so I do think it's an important topic for us to talk soon about how do we address that, because a ton of money will just catch us up. It doesn't do anything to get us the preferred employer because of dollars. And I think we have a very loyal workforce overall, and they're not here just for the money. But I can tell you, those that are able and willing to leave, they can make more leaving in some cases, actually in many cases. So it's a challenge and a concern for me and our departments. And sorry to get off sidetrack. The chief just
No, thank
sort
you.
of gave me that intro to that, and I hated not to take advantage of some discussion there.
Thank you.
Chief, I want to second Ms. Larson's comment about our appreciation for the data that you provided here, because I think it's critically important for us to be able to look at it, and you've laid out a case very clearly that there's an issue that we need to address here. So I really do appreciate that. And to refer back to the county administrator's comments, I think we all understand that we're going to face some really challenging times in terms of figuring out exactly how we can make sure that we're retaining the best staff that we can. We're very fortunate to have county employees in every department, but certainly in the fire department, police department, public safety generally, who do above and beyond, and we need to figure out ways that address both their financial need and make them feel like they're appreciated in their jobs on a day-to-day basis because of the conditions that they're facing. So there's a lot of balancing going on here, and I think that you've given us an opportunity to look at that and say, yes, this makes sense to move ahead tonight on this particular aspect of compensation and staffing. So,
You know, we're very lucky to have the folks that we have. I know many of them are probably watching the meeting tonight to see the outcome, and we're very lucky to have all of them, and we appreciate your support. And I think this is a step towards helping with that life-work balance and giving those this time off to recover.
and I have to say, as somebody who was not from this the generation that is seeking that more appropriate life-work balance, I really admire what they're doing.
Yes.
I think that it is a good sign that people are recognizing that, you know, just for their own mental health, for their own satisfaction in life, that work has an important role to play, but their work will be better and they will be more satisfied if they can find that right balance.
Yeah, and I'll just give a personal plug. I did tell you, but 2 weeks ago, I hope my father's not watching because he'll kill me. But my dad was unresponsive in his home, and thanks to Station 3, they brought him back, and I'm so appreciative. And they not only did they bring him back, but they talked to me about, you know, what are some things that we could put in place. You know, they were calm. They were comforting to me when he didn't want to go to the hospital because he answered all the questions correctly. They helped convince him that he really needed to go. And so, I mean, they went up, in my opinion, above and beyond. And so I'm so appreciative of that. And I know that they didn't have any idea who I was. So it certainly wasn't, they weren't saying, oh, well, let's tell her about this. I know that that's the way that they handle every call in our county.
ma'am.
And I'm so appreciative. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good job.
So,
All right, thank you very much, Chief.
oh,
If
I'll move
nobody
the
else has any-
motion, or
Okay.
unless Mr. Hippel wants to.
Yeah, I'll make the motion for approval.
So we have a motion to approve the 9 positions. Any further discussion? If not, Mr. Stevens, call the roll.
Mr. Hippel,
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower,
Aye.
Ms. Larson,
Aye.
Ms. Sadler,
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Now move on to our next item, which is board requests and directives. I think that's right. Anybody want to?
Want to lease off?
I have nothing this time.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Let's see, I've got a few things.
I will comment, though, if you will allow me.
Yeah, go right ahead.
But, you know, the people who have to work mandatory overtime tend to overuse sick leave. And I think one of the finest I ever heard was somebody who called in and said, I can't come to work, I'm sick. And they said, what's wrong? And he says, it's my eyes. And he says, what's wrong with your eyes? And he says, I can't see coming to work. So
Now you're giving
we don't want
ideas
to
out
get to
there.
that point.
Oh, my goodness.
We'll give that to our Good Morning James City County staff to use in their
Oh, yes,
their
yes.
next edition.
Yeah. Boom.
Couple of things. I was talking to somebody about, and I don't know if this is the right terminology or not, about black lights, and they're LED lights, and they're being used. In fact, I was telling the county administrator about them, And it's something that I would like to ask that the planning commission look into. And what it does is it's designed to shine a light down, but not up and not outside the area. And evidently it's not a cone on it. It's how the light is designed. And supposedly half of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel has half of that in there, and you can see the difference in the lights. And there's some states that are starting to bring this in, and they said you can be in the middle of a community where it's lit and still see the stars. So it's not casting that extra light out that, everybody's talking about. And you go down the road and you look through the trees and above, and there's a cast of lights where there's a shopping center back there or something. And this may soften that, and it's something we probably ought to look at as far as putting in our ordinance. And they said that the cost between the regular light and that light is very minimal, and these are LEDs as well, so they save power along the way. So I thought that might be something that we could send over to the planning commission to research and look at, and maybe something we want to put in our ordinances from this point on to try to, cut down on some of that light exposure that we're getting. CTB evidently had a meeting today. I was informed this weekend. Interstate 64. I'm so irritated at this, I could scream. Interstate 64, they're looking at doing a P3 tolling in order to build the rest of the interstate. Now, I'm warning you right now that if they build that, and everybody in James City County better be aware of it, if they build that, and it's not for congestion relief right now. So we were going to get money from I-81. Now, evidently, there's a company that is going to put in a proposal, and it'll probably go into the next administration. They'll probably hold it off and let's look in the next administration. But they're going to have, and we've got 3 lanes now.
I actually think they did talk to the Northam administration, but they only
Yeah.
have like 4 days left.
Right. So there's nothing they could do with
Yeah.
that. And that's who called me, his administration, and was explaining, what do we think? I don't like it. I'm not for it. I'm not anywhere near this. Because what's going to happen is we're going to have a P3 going from 295 to James City County line where we stop at Lightfoot. And then there's going to be a gap from there all the way down to Jefferson. They already inched it from the Coliseum up to Jefferson. Now they're going to say, well, you know what, let's just connect this. And we'll connect this, and then we'll have, now, they're not going to let HR TAC do a P3. They're not going to let HR TAC take care of the tolling and all that, because HR TAC, the money we put in HR TAC that all the citizens put into to have these roads built. Now, the one we just finished on the interstate, we're saying we're going to toll it. We've already paid for it once. Now we're going to pay for it twice? This is, I'm telling you, it's double taxation as far as I'm concerned. And they say, well, we can get it better, we can get it done quicker if we do the P3. Because they said first it was 400 million, now it's 600 million, now it's gotten up to 750 million. This same road. There's no bridge work needs to be done. It's all shoulder, it's all trees and all of that. So I've ridden it, I understand this like you wouldn't believe. Well, the company that's at 895 to 295, now they're going to go from 295 to 64. They're going to put a proposal in. Then they're going to go from our area of 64 down to Hampton. They're going to toll the whole thing. Well, of course, we've already built that. We've already paid for this. Now we're going to toll possibly, I can see where it's coming. The camel's head is going under a tent and the 2 humps are following. And what they're going to do is they're going to take that and they're going to take this other piece and say, well, we might as well now toll it so it's all connected into one. And think of all the money you're going to get from everybody traveling down here to go to Virginia Beach and go to Outer Banks and all that. Yes, there'll be money in that. But we're looking at probably 50 to 60 years of a company controlling it. and using those funds, and it's a private thing, and this is what they're doing. I don't fault them for doing it, and I don't fault them for trying to get in here. But we're at a point where it's gonna affect, we've got 3 lanes now. You can ride if there's no traffic in there. If there's traffic, it'll go up steadily as far as cost to get in there. So if you want to jump in and go to Virginia Beach, I'm worried we're gonna, not today, but eventually we're gonna stall ourselves into what we fought for 20 years. Now, I've got nothing against VDOT. VDOT worked 20 plus years, probably 30 years, to open up the interstate. When we formed HR TAC, it's taken us 7 years to do all 3 sections of the interstate. And that's the citizens' money being put in to roads. And, they tried to take some of that money and use it in other places, but they couldn't, because it only can be used for new highways. So this is something that's possibly coming.
Yeah, I had heard today it was 95 to 234, to exit 234.
Yep. And,
So,
and that,
a separate turnpike,
yeah,
right?
no, that's gonna add to the interstate, make it 3 lanes. That's gonna make it's gonna add 2 more running lanes that they're gonna toll coming down through here.
So attached to our highway.
Like what we have now, and it'll continue all the way up to 295.
But you're paying a toll.
You're
You're
gonna,
in the one at the 2 lanes.
if traffic gets bad, you're gonna toll to get around everybody and go down there. We'll still have the 2 lanes that we have as far for everybody to run down for free.
Yeah.
But this third one will be gantries and it'll be tolled. Now, gantries may be the whole distance. If I come down 295 and get off at Lightfoot and I use that, am I tolled there or am I tolled for the whole thing? Of course, none of that's worked out yet. But
Well, it goes both ways on 895.
yeah,
You're told the whole way, plus you can be told when you jump off.
thank you. And evidently, I've been told that the company that's doing that is gonna put in a proposal to do this. And I'm not sure if that's exactly true, but I want to bring it to this board so you know that, I mean, I know what VDOT's doing. And VDOT's going, I can build it today at this. Okay, yes, you can. But what cost is it for us for 50, 60 years? And what cost are we losing? And we're already being taxed for this to begin with. Why isn't that money going back into HR TAC, which all they can spend that money on is new roads? And it's put right into the system. So I'm very frustrated at this news, and I told them I was frustrated with it. And I told them that I didn't think our board would be in support of it. I'd have to check with them, but I don't think the citizens of James City County would be in support of it as well. I mean, we've worked hard to get this interstate cleared and open, and we're using it, and it's beautiful. Now we want to put a toll on it. I said, this is not Northern Virginia. And I mean, you're in no man's land in New Kent. And what are you gonna get? What are you gonna see there? I mean, so I love the New Kent and all that, and I think it's a beautiful county. But just wanted to let y'all know that I am totally frustrated with this deal that is being taught. And if they put this proposal together and evidently send it to the secretary, then they have to react on it. And then it may be something that we never even get a vote on. It may be, well, I think this is best for, and I know the new secretary is a good fella and all that. Seth Miller is really, a good guy, good solid individual. And I think he's going to do an outstanding job. But I'm worried with this one coming down that we're going to end up, and our children are going to end up holding the bag on this money. Elizabeth River Crossing was a failure. I know it was probably the best decision they could make at that time, but it was a failure. Had to bail them out. And they could only bail them out and get another company in there to buy like 52% of that. So the state's holding the rest. So we're paying for that. So more to come on that. Just wanted to fill you in on what's going on there, and,
So, Mr. Hippel, I hope you will keep us informed of that, and,
Yes.
if there's an appropriate time for us to insert ourselves into the discussion, I think the board would want to have that opportunity. Mr. Miller, as I understand it, is from Hampton Roads.
Yes, he is.
And so he would need to appreciate the efforts and the sacrifices that have already been made by the Hampton Roads population to improve our highway system on our own efforts.
and he's done well on our behalf up to this point with the CTB and all. So he's been a good partner for us, and then with you on the TPO and PDC, that'll help as well, because we can both work on the planning side and the finance side and
Right.
all that, and keep us in the forefront in James City County. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
That's all I got.
Okay.
That's enough of me.
Ms. Larson?
Just sort of getting back into it. Recently, I know, I was disappointed, and I know that there were some extenuating circumstances with the weather event last week. But what happened to those citizens on 95, which I'm sure impacted some of our citizenry? We know of a teenager that, thank God, had a nice Uber driver who she could have turned out very differently. I don't know if y'all have seen that on the national news or not, about the teenager that had an Uber driver was bringing her down here and got stuck, and made sure that she had lodging. And once they were able to get off, because she was was unable to rent a hotel room, so she would have been stuck had a regular Uber driver just dropped her. And not, I mean, if, because understandably, they have other people they need to get to. So I don't understand why we can't do better in 2022. I can't understand why we don't have more underground power lines in this area in 2022, and why I have to worry about a small weather event taking out my power. I'm frustrated and tired about it. I mean, if you can go across the James, surely you can figure out a way that our citizens can make sure they have power through a not so huge storm. We didn't get 2 feet of snow here, so we had an afternoon of snow. It was sun shining by the afternoon. So I would just say, you're frustrated about the roads. I'm frustrated about these two items.
Snow's
So-
coming Sunday.
Oh,
Ms. Sadler, do you have anything?
Yeah, just one thing, as I'm sitting here watching the public service announcement scroll across the bottom of the screen, talking about the convenience centers, I was wondering if Mr. Stevens could please give us an update on the Toano Convenience Center regarding the opening and closing and the reasons for the temporary closure. And I know I've had a few emails from some citizens, so I just thought maybe it would be a good time to bring us a quick update, please. And that would be all I have.
Sure. Ms. Sadler, I'd be happy to speak to that. Just to make sure that I'm not missing some of our citizens, we do operate 3 convenience centers, Jolly Pond, Tuning, and Toano, and we have temporarily closed the Toano site and reduced hours at the Tuning site due to staffing issues. And that solid waste division that oversees these 3 sites that operate typically some version of 7 days a week have 9 positions with 4 full-time and 5 part-time. Our current vacancies there, we have 4 positions that are vacant, we have 1 out sick, and we had another one today that is now under quarantine. So our 9 positions are down to 3. And so we've been in some shape or fashion with that kind of staffing issue for the last several months. We often look to Buildings and Grounds Division, both within the General Services Department. Within Buildings and Grounds, we have 30 positions. We have 7 of those that are vacant, so they're having some of their own issues with keeping up with their workload. And then we've often looked over to Parks and Rec to help staff our convenience centers in times of need, and they're having some similar staffing vacancies as well. So it really does reflect back to staffing for us. I know it's an inconvenience to our residents, particularly those that get in their habit or close to their home, one of these convenience centers. We are looking at how do we open it and talking about other options, and we have made 1 hire, so that person is coming on. We have another job offer that I think we'll make this week, so I think there are some improvements in the coming weeks. And then we'll talk about how do we operate, and we have talked about closing Tuning a few days a week and opening Toano a few days a week. It's not quite as simple as that sounds in terms of moving containers around. You spread us out a little more. And in terms of staffing, if we have a cancellation or somebody calling sick or needs to leave for an appointment at the Tuning Road site, we do have staff that's 5 minutes away versus 15 minutes away. So some of the logistics are a little harder as we move out from that site. But our hope is to be able to reopen in the next several weeks, so in early February. And I say that as I'm also talking about case counts rising within our workforce, and that's some of my comments later, and some of the impacts that this current surge in COVID might have on our ongoing staffing challenges elsewhere. But we do empathize with our residents, and we certainly want them to know that we are talking about it on a very regular basis and trying to reopen the Toanna site at least a few days a week in the very near future. Anything else I can add to that for you?
Yeah, Mr. Stevens, I'm just wondering, I have had a couple comments from folks wondering if there can be some temporary signage out on Richmond Road there that before people make that turn to go down to the convenience center, if there's some sort of, I don't know how often it would have to be changed out, but just a temporary sign just explaining what the hours are, and so that, because I know people are frustrated because they go all the way down there and with their debris, and then they have to turn around and come back out. If there's a sign placed there, perhaps, where they can see that and keep on going if they need to, just for convenience sake. I don't know if that's something we could look into or not, but just a suggestion from a few citizens that I've heard from.
Yes, ma'am. I think we could address signage for certain at the convenience center itself. So when someone, if they were to arrive there with no other options, we could give them those addresses and operating hours so they could go to one of the other sites. And again, the Jolly Pond site's 10 or 15 minutes away, so it's not right next door. But if somebody has an urgent need to dispose of trash, we ought to be able to help accommodate that. And we will provide options for that and signage. I think that's a good suggestion.
Thank you for your taking on this challenging time. Appreciate all your help.
Absolutely.
Did you have anything else, Ms. Sadler?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I just want to reiterate a point that I made earlier about the fact that, as the county administrator just indicated, we are seeing a surge in COVID cases, and it's anticipated that it will run for the next couple of weeks. That this is a time to double down on the efforts to bring this under control. The best thing we can all do as a community is to go out there and make sure we get vaccinated, encourage those who are not yet vaccinated to get vaccinated or to get their boosters if they've gotten their first shots that are now eligible for boosters, to wear masks. I would be doing that if we weren't 6 feet apart or more here this evening, and did for much of the meeting tonight. And follow the other protocols that will help us all to stay safer. Remember, it's not just about you protecting yourself, it's about you protecting those that you love and those that you come in contact with, and the community at large, and reducing the ability of this virus to spread as rapidly as it is. So that's just a point that I would like to reiterate. And then I also would want to point to, first, to thank our county cable staff. They put together a collection of performances by Betty White that are in the public domain in celebration of her life when she passed away just short of her 100th birthday. And I didn't want us to lose sight of our loss of a citizen who was just weeks away from his 100th birthday, and that's Bert Aaron. Bert, who was the Peninsula's Citizen of the Year chosen by the Daily Press in 2018, was just an incredible gentleman who started off as an engineer, who became an advocate for humanitarian programs and education, who was a champion of the arts, especially the Virginia Symphony. Bert's birthday would have been yesterday, and he made an indelible impression on the peninsula more broadly, and especially on James City County. He was a resident of Kingsmill, one of my constituents, but no single magisterial district, no single neighborhood really could claim Bert. He was a citizen for the ages, and we will miss him dearly and extend regrets and our sympathy to Gladys and his family. That, I will turn it over to the county administrator for his report.
Thank you, Chairman Glenn. I will say you took about half my notes of what I
Oh,
was
I'm
going to
sorry.
share. I was going to talk about COVID cases within the community, within our workforce. They're certainly at a high level, so I won't repeat that. Just a reminder, as you said, not to become complacent and try to do what we've done for much of the last 2 years in social distancing, washing our hand, wearing masks, and probably most importantly, staying away from others when we don't feel well. And that's something I think we've all learned to do, but we need to remind ourselves to do that. I also ask for patience from our residents as we talk about some of our normal service deliveries being impacted with the staffing shortages that were pre-pandemic. They've only gotten worse in many areas for the county, and the increase in COVID cases has made it even more difficult to continue our normal service. Again, we will provide those emergency services. We're committed to making sure we come when you call, but things that are other delivery from building inspections to parks and recs to convenience center sites, we may be a little slower or not as frequent as we were before. Some of the good news, as you've heard on the news and we've heard from our local hospital systems, this variant doesn't appear to be as severe as some of the previous variants, and that while vaccinated individuals can catch it, they seem to have much less severe complications than unvaccinated individuals. I will say our local hospital systems have confirmed, at least what we're hearing in the state and national news, that most of those hospitalized with COVID are unvaccinated, and as of last week, that was 90% in the Riverside system. So the vaccines do help. I don't want folks to think they can't catch it, but I also don't want to think it's not worth considering if you haven't considered it yet. So I would continue to ask us all to be patient with one another, stay vigilant in protecting yourself and your family from this virus, and consider getting a vaccine or booster if you've not done so in the last 6 months. So that's all I have, sir.
Thank you very much. We need a closed session this evening, and so I'd look for a motion to enter into closed session to consider a personnel matter, the appointment of individuals to county boards and/or commissions pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia and pertaining to the Planning Commission and Thomas Nelson Community College.
Motion.
We have a motion. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, closed session. Back into session, and
Mr.
look for
Chair,
a
I'll
motion.
certify that we only spoke about those matters that we said that we would speak about.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. Ms. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. We have nomination for the at-large position on the Planning Commission.
I would nominate Mr. John Haldeman for that position.
Mr. Haldeman's been nominated. Any discussion? If not, Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And appointment to the Thomas Nelson Community College Board.
I nominate Joe Fuentes for that position.
Okay, nomination for Mr. Fuentes. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. There's no other business to come before the board tonight? Do I have
No, may I just make a
Yes,
comment and
absolutely.
just say that Mr. Fuentes is taking a seat that Ms. Mary Ann Mamoni occupied, prior to her death, and I just want to thank her. Hopefully she can hear me, for her service on that board, and thank her family for her service as well.
Thank you. Very, very good comments. Yes. Do I have a motion to adjourn until 1 p.m. on January 25th for the business meeting?
Motion?
Okay. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.